Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
It's 6 o'clock Central African time, and good morning to you on this Thursday. It is the 22nd of May, and thank you so much for joining us here on Africa Rise and Shine. Let's thank Jabu Nkolele for driving us up until this point with that amazing music. And we at Rise and Shine are with you until 9 this morning. My name is Asanda Beda, broadcasting live from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. Lots to cover, of course, in the next 3 hours. But in the first hour, what we'll be looking at is President Ramaphosa telling President Trump that there was no genocide against white Afrikaners in South Africa. And a Congolese former prime minister convicted of embezzling millions from a failed agriculture venture. We'll be looking at those stories and more. We're coming to you on our DSTV channel. It's number 802. On OpenView, we are on 628. And www.channelafrica.co.za. Of course, we are live streaming. We've been doing that through our various social media platforms, and our handles are at Channel Africa 1. So whichever way you connected to us, we appreciate and welcome you. Let's get our first news update here on Africa Rise and Shine for this Thursday, as we say good morning to Onele Nzinzi, and then also good morning to Musibudi Makura for our first sports headlines.
News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has told US President Donald Trump during a media engagement at the White House that there is no white genocide in South Africa. The two leaders engaged with the media in the Oval Office were holding private talks in the White House. The South African delegation included well-known golfers, business people, labor unions and cabinet ministers. Ramaphosa said there was criminality in the country which targeted people of all races.
President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends, like those who are here. When we have talks between us on around a quiet table, it will take President Trump to listen to them. I'm not going to be repeating what I've been saying. I would say if there was Afrikaner farmer genocide, I can bet you these three gentlemen would not be here, including my Minister of Agriculture. He would not be with me. So it'll take him, President Trump, listening to their stories, to their perspective.
A Kenyan and a Ugandan activist detained in Tanzania after traveling to observe a court appearance by jailed opposition leader remain in custody. Tanzania's Law Society had initially said the duo had been deported. Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and Ugandan lawyer Agatha Atuhaire had gone to Dar es Salaam to attend opposition leader Tundu Lissu's first court appearance on Monday on charges of treason and publishing false information. The case has highlighted what government critics say is growing crackdown on opponents of President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Details remain sketchy around a group of migrants deported to South Sudan by U.S. President Donald Trump's administration. A flight carrying a dozen people had landed in Juba yesterday. A United States judge had now ruled that U.S. officials must retain custody and control of migrants sent to South Sudan. This is despite a court order restricting removal of other countries. Judge Brian Murphy issued the ruling after an emergency hearing in which attorneys of immigrants said the Trump administration appears to have begun deporting people from Myanmar and Vietnam to South Sudan. Channel Africa correspondent Tuka Wilson says this is not the first time the U.S. has made a similar move.
This is not really something that everybody expected, because this is the second time. Last month in April, a Congolese was deported to Juba, and the government said, no, U.S., this is not ours. They decided to return the deportees. So it created a very serious diplomatic issue, whereby at the end, the South Sudan government had to accept the Congolese deportees. Now this one has happened again. But unfortunately, until now, the government has not issued an official statement regarding the deportees.
A British national has been arrested in Namibia for allegedly sexually molesting minors and taking nude photographs of them. Douglas Robert Brooke is also accused of touching the children inappropriately while on holiday in central Namibia. Police said the suspect targeted young boys and girls from the indigenous San community in the central Ochujupa region. The 65-year-old Briton, who faces 38 charges, including rape, indecent assault and child exploitation, is yet to respond. Lastly, U.S. President Donald Trump has set up plans for a futuristic missile defense system that will shield the entire U.S. from aerial attacks. Trump said the Golden Dome would be developed by America's Space Force and could be operational before he leaves office. The BBC's Peter Bowers reports.
The chances are reasonably good that Donald Trump will get the initial $25 billion, but there is a big question mark over whether the money will be there to complete the project. And just completing the project is a matter of huge debate here. Some experts are suggesting that it just simply isn't possible to protect a country of this size with this kind of technology. Just getting the hardware in place in space, the logistics, is going to be a huge task.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, Tottenham Hotspur beat Manchester United in the UEFA Europa League final last night. And Emma Raducanu suffers an injury scare in a Strasbourg loss. Details coming up at 6:30.
A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
All right, after the news every day, we take a look at some stories that have made headlines on the continent and around it, and seeing what we can maybe expect in terms of updates on those stories. So today we start our Africa Roundup with the U.S. President Donald Trump, who's confronted South African President Cyril Ramaphosa on Wednesday with explosive false claims of white genocide and unfair land seizures during a tense White House meeting that was reminiscent of his February ambush of Ukraine's Volodymyr Zelensky.
I would say if there was Afrikaner farmer genocide, I can bet you these three gentlemen would not be here, including my Minister of Agriculture. He would not be with me. So it'll take him, President Trump, listening to their stories, to their perspective. That is the answer to your question.
But Mr. President, I must say that we have, we have thousands of stories talking about it. Sure. And we have documentaries, we have news stories, and that. Is Natalie here, somebody here to turn that? I could show you a couple of things, and it has to be responded to.
Yeah, sure.
We have,
South Africa's Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana delivered his budget speech earlier this afternoon, yesterday, which includes some budget cuts, but also lower revenue forecasts as GDP growth has been revised down.
Inflation expectations are now above central bank targets in many advanced and emerging economies. And new trade barriers may raise inflation and prolong the cycle of higher interest rate. Turning to the domestic outlook, Madam Speaker, as a small open economy, South Africa is dependent on global trade and financial inflows. This makes us particularly exposed to the global economic developments. As a result, we now estimate real GDP to grow at 1.4% in 2020. This is lower than the 1.9% we projected in March.
A Congolese former prime minister was convicted of embezzling millions from a huge failed agriculture venture in one of the highest profile corruption cases brought under President Felix Tshisekedi against the government of his predecessor.
Augustine Matata Ponyo Mapon, who is not in custody, was found guilty, Democratic Republic of Congo's Constitutional Court said, of embezzling $245 million from projects including the Bukanga Lonzo development. One of Africa's largest ever agricultural investments, it was touted as an answer to chronic food shortages when it launched in 2014. 3 years later, production ceased when the South African company operating it left Congo, saying it had not been paid in months. However, Ponyo's lawyer, Laurent Onyemba, said on Tuesday that the trial against his client was unfair and politically motivated.
The ruling is disconnected from the truth and invalidates any credibility for the image of our justice system.
Onyemba said Ponyo is in Kinshasa.
A bomb attack on a Médecins Sans Frontières hospital and pharmacy in Old Fangak may amount to a war crime. This is according to the United Nations Commission on Human Rights in South Sudan, which says the attack was deliberate. The director of MSF South Africa, Monica Kenya, says they've now opened a temporary healthcare facility in South Sudan to continue helping patients and those affected by the war.
We were taken by surprise by this attack, even though we've had a similar attack at our hospital in Ulang, Upper Western Nile. And we're just blindsided by this. Hospitals and medical facilities should not be attacked by any of the warring parties. What we've done right now is we've evacuated the wounded who we could take with us to a temporary health facility in a nearby town. This critically injured have been taken to ICRC facilities further away, but the people of the town of Fangak do not have access to any hospital level care and will not be able to have any access until we can ensure that they're safe if they come back to the hospital.
And that's how we come to the end of today's Africa Roundup.
Mix Vibration sur Channel Africa.
Révérend Dr Allen.
Je suis content, très heureux d'être de la partie ce soir et bonjour à tous nos auditeurs.
Je rappelle que pour les intimes, il vous appelle bien sûr BMB. Aujourd'hui, nous parlons courage sur Mix Vibration. Comment définissez-vous le terme courageux?
Ça vient du latin cor, qui veut tout simplement exprimer la bravoure, la force de l'âme ou encore la virilité, le héroïsme que quelqu'un peut avoir en face de difficultés, en face de problèmes, en face de défis.
Mix Vibration, tous les dimanches de 18h à 19h, temps universel.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
We now look at some of the stories making headlines in Central Africa as we speak to Aaron Ngambi, a geopolitical analyst focusing on African affairs. He's also a columnist for The Mail and Guardian. Let's zoom into West Africa, and very good morning to you, Aaron. How are you today?
Good, thank you, and good morning to you, and good morning to our listeners this morning.
Thanks for making time. So let's start with former DRC Minister Augustine Matata Ponyo has been sentenced to hard labor on corruption charges. We understand he embezzled some funds, public funds. What were they allocated for, these funds, and what is the amount?
Well, we do understand that the amount that he's been indicted to have misappropriated or embezzled is $245 million. And this was an amount allocated to establish an agricultural piece of land to engage in agricultural activities. So basically, this was supposed to be a government project that would employ over 22,000 employees and be able to feed basically the entire Congo and produce agricultural produces. Unfortunately, this project did not take off, and so it is alleged, and in fact, it's been almost proved that he embezzled these monies, and it's been indicted, and he will serve 10 years of hard labor in jail.
His lawyer has called this ruling unfair and politically motivated. What are your thoughts around that, and what has been other commentary around this news?
Yeah, I can understand why his lawyer would make that assertion. And the reason for that is because we have seen a systematic pattern in the Tshisekedi administration, that most people that have disagreed with him, people from the previous regime, including even the former president, Joseph Kabila, has been harassed in one way or the other. So I think to many people, or to some people, they think that this is a politically motivated case. But on the flip side, this is a case that's now been proven in the courts of law, and the victim in question has been indicted and charged, and in fact found guilty of embezzlement.
So what will this mean then? As you say, the funds were for an agricultural project. There are food shortages in the DRC. What will it mean for the efforts to tackle that issue after this has come out? Will they even be able to gather funding and be credible in terms of their plans to deal with food shortages?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think that $245 million is not a small amount of money. Yeah. If the amount of money in question is actually the amount of money that was embezzled, it is almost extremely difficult to replace that kind of funding. But not only that, it also sent a wrong signal to other potential investors who want to come into the agriculture space, to come and invest into agricultural produces so that they can feed the people. And so this is a very delicate issue. It is very difficult to figure out if the government will be able to replace this kind of amount of money and even go on with the project. I think that is yet to be seen. However, I think that it sends a wrong signal and puts the DR Congo into a very bad light in terms of people that would be interested to agriculture or investment ventures in the Congo.
Let's move to Chad now, where former Prime Minister, the opposition leader also, Sukse Masra, has been placed under provincial detention on allegations of inciting hatred in the country. What can you tell us here?
Well, Sukse Masra is an interesting figure. He's also a former Prime Minister. He did contest against the incumbent in their last elections, and he didn't really score much in that election. I think he got about 16 to 18% of the votes, while the incumbent Idris Deby scored about 61%. So you can look at the margin. Even though Sukse Masra refused to concede defeat and claimed that there were a lot of irregularities and malpractices during that election, but he's gone on to now be detained, as has been investigated in connection with the violence that took place in the southwest of Chad, where thousands and thousands of people were killed. Initially, people thought that this was an ethnic uprising. It's an ethnic violence between the Fulani headsman and the ethnic group of people that are of that region over land dispute, but it turns out to be that this might be issues that are political rather than tribal or regional. Therefore, the government is investigating Sukse Masra to be connected with armed groups that have risen up to cause this kind of violence and confusion, even though he denies all the charges against him. And also, we do know that these charges are really serious charges. He's been charged with arson. He's been charged with the killings that are going on. He's been charged with arming groups that are rising up against other groups. And basically, that is destabilizing of the country. And with that, those charges carry a life sentence. Therefore, if he's convicted, then Sukse Masra will go in life. And he's relatively young. He's in his 40s, and he's quite an upcoming and promising politician.
This was also nearly a week after he was arrested on suspicion of inciting hatred. It seems to have been moved fast for us to be at this point now. What are your thoughts on that? Was it not so quick?
Yeah, and this is the connection that the government is trying to make between, the charges of hatred and also the uprising that happened a week, 2 days later. So the government is basically making the argument that he is fueling this hatred, and so groups rising up against other groups on tribal and regional basis, and also the allegations that he could be behind finding some of these groups of providing arms so that they can kill one another. But the evidence is yet to be established, and for now he's in detention for the foreseeable future.
What are his supporters saying?
Well, his supporters think that this is an effort by government to bury him politically, to send him to a political dustbin, and so that he does not come back. Like I said, he is relatively young. Sukse Masra is probably about 41 or early 40s, and he's already been prime minister before, and he's already served in different portfolios in government. And now he's an opposition leader, and a quite promising one. Therefore, some people think that the government is trying to link him to these killings and uprisings that are going on in the southwest part of the country. Therefore, so that they can lynch him and politically disadvantage him and probably get rid of him politically entirely.
Let's go to Rwanda now. They've hosted their first international security conference on Africa. President Paul Kagame saying that peace and security in Africa should not be outsourced. Has this kind of a conference been long overdue, in your thoughts?
Well, those are the words of President Paul Kagame. He thinks that this conference is long overdue. He thinks that this conference pertaining to Africa's security should have been happening and have not happened in a long time. And he is basically talking about how Africa should take responsibility for its own security rather than relying on other countries, especially the foreign countries in the West or the East, to come in and help us with this. I think that there's a lot of people that would agree with those sentiments. I think there's a lot of people that would, on the face value of what Paul Kagame says, would agree with him. But sometimes we have a lot of leaders in Africa that says one thing, but their actions are completely different. I believe that the leaders of Burkina Faso, the leader of Mali, the leader of Western countries that have been taken over by the military junta would agree that it's about time that Africa takes responsibility of its own security and takes care of its own. And also some other African countries who are not military leaders. But I think the message coming from President Paul Kagame is interesting because he himself has been accused of, or his government has been accused of meddling in affairs of other countries that are of a security nature.
Do you think Rwanda is in the best position currently to be hosting such a conference?
Well, I think it depends on how you look at it. In one breath, I think Rwanda has some credibility in terms of regional peace and stability, and that it has, since the genocide, made tremendous progress. And there are a lot of people that will vouch for that. There are a lot of people that would say because of this historical record and the proven leadership of President Paul Kagame, Rwanda is better proven to be able to lead such a conference. But also, in another breath, there are people that we disagree because of what we see in the Eastern DR Congo and the allegations by the United Nations and other experts that have gone into the Eastern DR Congo that Rwanda is actually funding and providing arms to the M23 rebels to destabilize the DR Congo, even though Rwanda has actually.
So let's talk in terms of the key attendees that were there and those that you feel should have been there if they were not.
Well, I think a few attendees that were there, there was quite a number of African countries that were represented. Some were represented by actual heads of states, others were represented by ministers assigned by the heads of states. But I think that for those who were supposed to have been there, I was hoping that we should have seen people who are key players in this conflict that is going on, people that have been very vocal, people that have tried to intervene in what's been happening in the Eastern DR Congo. Some of those players should have been there, including the SADC region leaders, including the Eastern community leaders, and also any other leaders that feel that this is an important conference and that Rwanda actually deserves to lead this path of talking about security for all African countries.
And then in terms of this conference, do you feel like it's going to actually change the narrative on Africa's role in its own conflict resolutions? I know that's the goal, but can we reach that point?
Yeah, I think that is the attempt by those who attended. That was the attempt by President Paul Kagame to send a message that we ought to actually look internally in Africa if we have any disputes or conflicts or issues, that we ought to actually sit down and dialogue and find a solution rather than going to seek help from outside. You know that most of the conflicts in Africa, not just in the Eastern Congo or any other places, most of the conflicts in Africa, unfortunately, turns out that the powerful nations of this world have vested interests. You find that the United States is perhaps involved indirectly or directly in that conflict. Even in its mediation efforts, you find that perhaps the French government is involved, and so on and so forth. So I think that the tone that's been set from Rwanda is the correct tone. I think that it's achievable, but I think it will take a lot of sincerity on the part of African leaders to really look inwardly and see that they're not hypocritical in any breath when they talk about this issue.
As you speak of us looking inwardly, do you think we are able to share our security priorities by, first of all, looking inwardly, so looking at national interests, but also being able to accommodate regional interests while we do that?
Yeah, I think it's very possible. And I think that both, if you look at, in this case, we're talking about Rwanda and also the allegations of its involvement in Eastern DR Congo. If you look at the kind of work that the Eastern African community countries have done in trying to bring all the parties together, if you look at what SADC has done in trying to bring President Tshisekedi and President Paul Kagame together, and even the M23 leaders to the table, the efforts have been, encouraging. Unfortunately, in almost all cases, these regional blocs have failed to sit the leaders down in that conflict, to be specific. And it was, for me personally, it was disappointing to see that the two leaders, President Paul Kagame and President Tshisekedi, were actually able to go to Qatar and sit down with the leader of Qatar rather than sit down with the African leaders. So I think that that's an issue of confidence. Do we have confidence in ourselves and leaders within the region, or do we prefer to have somebody else to mediate these conflicts that we have?
Let's move to Malawi now. They've suspended the IMF program. What can we read into this? They've got a serious economic woes. Why this move and why now?
Yeah, Malawi is an interesting case. They have an election coming up actually this year in September. And I think that the regime is panicking. Yes, the International Monetary Fund has suspended its credit facility, extended credit facility to Malawi. And the government of Malawi claims that this was a mutual agreement, that they came together and agreed to suspend this program. But the timing of itself is rather interesting because this is at a time when Malawi has serious economic issues. We've seen with the protests that have been going around in Blantyre, in Lilongwe, in almost all the big cities. And people are basically rising up against the government because of the levels of poverty, unemployment, among young people. It's just skyrocketing. So it is interesting that the government claims that they're doing this so that they can focus on local issues and dealing with poverty and other things, rather than trying to actualize this extended credit facility from the IMF. I know that the opposition have actually called out government and said that this is not the right time to do that. This is the wrong move. It's the wrong thing to do. But anyway, the government of Malawi has gone ahead and thinks that in an attempt to do that, they'll actually find homegrown solutions or local solutions to the problems that they're facing, rather than looking outwardly to the International Monetary Fund.
Any other stories to look forward to that we can expect to discuss in the next few days in Central Africa?
Well, yeah, there's a lot that is going on in Central Africa. I think that we may see a few things going forward. I'm expecting to see how the situation unfolds in Zambia. As you're aware, the American government, through the ambassador in Lusaka, they were actually suspended all aid with $50 million in health, citing corruption, and actually accusing the Zambian government of not being serious in terms of dealing with corruption in health, in terms of medicines, and things like that. Also, we are aware that there are a lot of issues to look forward in what's happening in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe seems to be always an interesting place. Seems like something is going on almost every day. We look forward to also hearing a lot about the leadership of Duma Boko in Botswana and how that is making tremendous progress. One thing that I have seen with African leaders is that when they come into office, when they're rookies, they're greenies, they seem to be the savior of their country and the entire continent. They have a very positive outlook on things. They seem to be doing the right thing, but you give them a little bit of time, you get disappointed. We hope that is not the case in Botswana.
All right, let's leave it there then. Thank you so much again for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It's good to be with you again.
Thanks, Aaron. That is Aaron Ngambi, a geopolitical analyst focusing on African affairs. He's also a columnist of for the Mail and Guardian, giving us our stories making headlines in Central Africa on this Thursday. 31 minutes past 6. Let's say good morning to Onel Nzinzi for our news headlines.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has told U.S. President Donald Trump during a media engagement at the White House that there is no white genocide in the country. The two leaders engaged with the media in the Oval Office were holding private talks in the White House. Ramaphosa made clear there was criminality in the country which targeted people of all races. A Kenyan and Ugandan activist detained in Tanzania after traveling to observe a court appearance by a jailed opposition leader remain in custody. Tanzania's Law Society had initially said the duo had been deported. And Canada, Uruguay and Spain are amongst the countries calling for accountability from Israel after Israel's soldiers fired shots near an international diplomatic delegation visiting the occupied West Bank. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News headlines. The African perspective.
All right, let's say good morning for a full sports bulletin now for the first one for this Thursday on Rise and Shine. Here's Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Very good morning from the sports desk. Tottenham Hotspur defeated Manchester United 1-0 to win the Europa League final on Wednesday in Bilbao, Spain. Now, the victory secured Spurs their first title in 17 years. Athletic Bilbao's Estadio de San Mamés was full of tears of joy from Tottenham Hotspur fans clad in white and players alike at full time when the whistle was blown, as the team appears to have abolished the reputation for not finishing big matches. It's a major moment for Spurs as they win the club's first trophy since 2008 and first continental silverware since the 1983-1984 season. The North London club has struggled to shake off the reputation of being nearly good enough over the last decade and celebrated the win as if it was their first trophy in nearly 2 decades. Let's hear from the manager, Ange Postecoglou, who congratulated his players on a job well done.
Congratulations, Ange. I mean, you've told these players throughout they were going to do something special this season. How does it feel to see that realised?
Yeah, look, it's hard sort of to put into words the emotions. Super proud of the players. To quote my favourite Australian Prime Minister, Paul Keating, he said, after an unlikely victory, he said, "This is one for the true believers." And this is certainly one for the true believers, and that means, an unbelievable group of players who never wavered, never lost faith in me and what we were doing.
On to tennis news now. Emma Raducanu suffered an injury scare just 4 days before the French Open begins as the Brit lost to Daniel Collins of the USA in Strasbourg. The 22-year-old produced an excellent first set but needed treatment on a lower back issue after falling 5-love behind in the second. She went on to lose that match to Collins 4-6, 6-1 and 6-3. Now to reach the quarterfinals of that competition, Raducanu had taken a wild card into the clay court event in Strasbourg to get more practice on the surface before the French Open starts on Sunday. Despite the off-court medical timeout, there appeared to be no obvious signs of discomfort for Raducanu, but who put Collins under sustained pressure before the American managed to pull away. Collins, a former Australian Open runner-up who beat Roland Garros champion Iga Swiatek in Italy just last week, plays American top seed Jessica Pegula of the Russian world number 30 Anna Kazaskaya in the quarterfinals of this competition. Meanwhile, the organisers of the 2026 Men's Lever Cup tennis tournament between Team Europe as well as Team World will be held at the London O2 Arena from the 25th until the 27th of September. The O2 Arena also held the event's 5th edition in 2022. This year's 8th tournament is set to take place in San Francisco from the 19th to the 21st of September. The tournament, named after Australian great Rod Laver, pits 6-12 players from Europe and the rest of the world against each other in singles as well as double matches. Defending champions Team Europe have won 5 of the 7 editions so far. Springbok prop Babalwa Laja says her time at the Harlequins was nothing short of a fantastic time as she settles back into life in South Africa after 3 seasons in the English Premiership. Laja joined Quins in February of 2023 and made 29 appearances and also scored a try in a final match, the semi-final, in March of this year.
A fantastic time over the past 3 years at the Quins and playing in the Premiership Women's Rugby. And some of my favorite things, or the best parts about playing in the Premiership Women's Rugby, is the insatiable appetite for women's rugby. The atmosphere, the fans who come out in droves to support and watch women's rugby, its competitiveness and its unique ability to speak to young girls and boys or young people in a phenomenal way. And it gives them access to their role models. I think for me that was just, some of my favorite things about playing in the PWR.
And finally, Masters champion Rory McIlroy says he's quite excited to play his first tournament in India in the DP World India Championship later on this year. The five-time major winner will be in the field for the new event, which will be held at Daily Golf Club from the 16th until the 19th of October. He says this is a great opportunity and can't wait to play in front of Indian golf fans. Confirmation of McIlroy's first visit to India follows news he will return to the Australian Open for the first time in 11 years in December. The world number 2, also who won the 2013 Australian Open, will headline the field at Royal Melbourne from the 4th until the 7th of December, and also committed to playing in the 2026 tournament in Kingston Heath. Following a disappointing tied 47th finish at last week's US PGA Championship, McIlroy returns to action at the Memorial Tournament in Ohio on the 29th of May. The 36-year-old will also compete at the Canadian Open in the first week of June before bidding for his second major win of the year at the US Open in Oakmont in Pennsylvania. That's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa in business on Channel Africa.
The president of the Arab Bank for Economic Development in Africa, Beda, Dr. Sidi Ould Tah, he is vying for the presidency of the African Development Bank, the AFDB. He positions himself as a fervent defender of economic integration and structural transformation on the African continent.
So I do believe that I have a 360 view of the development challenges in the continent with my experience from both the supply side and the demand side. But more importantly, my vision is to bring on board all the stakeholders and to have a holistic approach for the development of the continent and to develop partnership across the continent and outside the continent, bringing all the stakeholders together to work for one goal is to make Africa green for life and livelihood of the African population.
Bringing the African markets into your home. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Let's get our first economics update now. In the world of business is Bontle Headbush. Good morning.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda. Good morning, and a very good morning to our listeners. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says he had hoped to use yesterday's meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump to reset his country's relationship with the U.S. and to discuss trade with his U.S. counterpart after Trump cancelled much-needed aid to South Africa and imposed a 30% tariff as part of his currently suspended raft of import taxes. Trump referred to his administration's cuts to the U.S. Agency for International Development as devastating and urged other nations to also contribute. Ramaphosa told reporters that the two countries had agreed to discuss critical minerals in South Africa. His government had also submitted a trade and investment proposal that included buying liquefied natural gas from the U.S. South Africa's Finance Minister, Enoch Godongwana, says government remains committed to reducing debt servicing costs with the aim of stabilizing debt at 77% in 2026, higher than previous estimates, with debt servicing costs accounting for $1.22 of every South African rand collected in revenue. Debt continues to crowd out spending on critical areas, including health and education. Godongwana says debt is expected to peak this year. The minister delivered the third budget speech in Parliament yesterday after two failed attempts.
In 2025-26, government debt is projected to stabilize at 77.4% of GDP. While this is 1 percentage point higher than projected in the March 12th budget, it is mainly due to lower nominal GDP. The main budget deficit decreased by 8 billion over the MTF compared to trial estimates in March. This narrow deficit is enabled by the steady expanding primary surplus.
Meanwhile, Godongwana has swapped the VAT increase for a hike in the fuel levy. Presenting his budget before Parliament in Cape Town, Godongwana says the fuel levy will be increased for the first time in 4 years by 16 South African cents per litre for petrol and 15 cents per litre for diesel. In March, Godongwana's budget was rejected by political parties, including the DA and EFF, due to disagreements over the proposed VAT hike. Minister Godongwana says the latest increase in the fuel levy is necessary to increase revenue.
To this end, the budget proposes an inflation-linked increase to the general fuel levy. For the 2025-26 fiscal year, this will new tax proposal that I'm announcing. This is the first fuel levy increase in 3 years. It means from the 4th of June this year, the general fuel levy will increase by 16 cents per litre and 15 cents per litre of diesel. Unfortunately, this tax measure alone will not close the fiscal gap over the medium term. The 2026 budget will therefore need to propose new tax measures aimed at raising 20 billion rand.
A Congolese former prime minister has been convicted of embezzling millions from a huge failed agriculture venture. Matata Ponyo Mapon, who served as prime minister from 2012 to 2016 under then-President Joseph Kabila, was convicted on Tuesday in a case involving the embezzlement of $245 million. He was sentenced to 10 years forced labor. In the same case, former governor of Congo's central bank, Geogracius Mutombo, was also sentenced to 5 years of forced labor, as was Christo Grobler, a South African businessman. None of the three is in custody, and all were tried in absentia. Ghana's central bank says it's ready to rethink its interest rate approach as inflation remains stubbornly above the set target, despite showing some signs of cooling. The central bank says it wants to check if its monetary policy is working after surprising the market with a rate hike in March. Consumer price inflation in Ghana dropped to 21.2% year-on-year in April, from 22.4% in March, but was still significantly above the 8% target, pointing to the tricky balance that the Bank of Ghana faces. Taking a look at our financial indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,591 naira 59. In Botswana, it's at 13 Bula 32. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 28. And in Zambia, it's at 27 kwacha 8. Moving on to the BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 reals 66. In Russia, it's at 80 rubles 11. India, 85 rupees 58, and China, 7 yuan 20, while South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 91 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,338 and platinum at $1,077 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $64.78 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Bundle Headbush.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa.
On this 22nd of May, it's Thursday, here's our G20 fact. G20 members include countries that are economically advanced, including France and the United States, and other countries that are emerging from a less developed economic base, including Indonesia and Brazil. 2 in every 3 people around the world live in the G20. And that's our G20 fact this morning.
G20 in Africa, exclusive to Channel Africa, championing Africa through solidarity, equality, and sustainability.
All right, let's talk the meeting of our President Cyril Ramaphosa and U.S. is Donald Trump. So President Cyril Ramaphosa has told the U.S. President Donald Trump that there was no genocide against white Afrikaners in South Africa, but a problem with rampant crime which affected all races. U.S. President played a video clip in front of President Ramaphosa that included South Africa's opposition political party, Economic Freedom Fighters leader Julius Malema, chanting the struggle song Kill the Boer to substantiate his claim that white farmers in South Africa were being targeted. The Equality Court in South Africa had ruled the song could be sung as it did not constitute hate speech. President Ramaphosa responded that Malema's chants were not government policy and that the Economic Freedom Fighters was a minority political party in the country. To discuss the meeting between President Ramaphosa and President Trump, we're joined by Joanna LeBlanc, foreign relations expert who has served as senior advisor to Haiti's ambassador to the United States and Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Washington, D.C. Joanna, always great catching up with you. How are you this morning?
Good morning. I am excellent. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Well,
it's always a pleasure.
Thanks for making time. Firstly, your reaction to the engagement between President Cyril Ramaphosa and President Donald Trump.
Well, first and foremost, as a former senior staffer at the U.S. Congress, who worked very closely with the White House, the State Department, and the various institutions in Washington, I can tell you this meeting was a very well anticipated meeting. And I can also say that I believe President Ramaphosa handled the conversation very well and very diplomatically with Mr. Trump, even though the two did not see eye to eye on the issue of genocide of white South Afrikaners in South Africa. And quite frankly, I don't believe it's an issue that the two will see eye to eye on. I think that it will continue to require continuous dialogue between the two groups. But I can also say that President Ramaphosa did not go into the meeting without any leverage. In fact, he went into the meeting with a great deal of leverage. We're talking about a country, South Africa, that holds roughly 90% of the world's most precious critical minerals that are needed for semiconductors, clean energy, and to advance society in the right direction.
Trump had a few compliments at the beginning for Ramaphosa as they were introducing each other, calling him a well-respected individual in many spaces. If he really feels this way about him, why do you think he would then go on to accuse him of unsupported negative allegations about South Africa as far as going to a political party that is in opposition of the main party, whose chants or utterances were not government policy, clearly were not government policy?
Well, let's be honest. The position that Mr. Trump has as it relates to South Africa is not personal. It's politics. In fact, the white South Afrikaners had been lobbying Washington since 2015 on this particular issue. So it's not an issue that was raised overnight. It's an issue that has been in discussion. It's an issue that President Trump was working on during his first term. And this is where we are today. So I would not take it personal. It's politics. It's the opposition group, the white South Afrikaners, doing what any group who feels as if they're being discriminated against do. They go and lobby other governments across the world. Sometimes some of those accusations are substantiated and sometimes are not. But it is nonetheless the right and the responsibility of their government to make sure that those accusations are dispelled through the media very early on, and don't allow these types of narrative to continue to fester and ultimately end up in creating foreign policy that have an impact on your nation.
Leslie played that video featuring the voice of leading South African opposition figure Julius Malema, shoot the Boer, shoot the farmer. There were a field of crosses that followed, with the U.S. president saying it was a burial site of white farmers. Do you think Trump was interested at all in listening to what President Ramaphosa had to say regarding that statement?
Well, first and foremost, I don't think President Ramaphosa will be able to get President Trump to change his mind about his perception of what is happening to white South Africans, white Afrikaners in South Africa, which is why I've always said this. I think that it would have been in the best interest of the South African government to really focus more on having a conversation to strengthen commercial relations with the United States government. And in the case of Julius Malema, the leader of the EFF, Julius Malema is a figure that the U.S. Congress and members of the administration is very, very familiar with. In fact, when I worked on Capitol Hill as a senior staffer, we've done a great deal of research on Mr. Malema. And at any given moment, sanctions will be imposed on Mr. Malema. I know that there was legislation introduced recently, trying to identify who from the ANC and other members within the South African society that should be sanctioned. And certainly Malena's name has come up in conversations because of some of his chants and some of his antics as it relates to white South Afrikaners in South Africa.
Let's talk about his sentiments around crime in the country. All South Africans suffer violent crimes. In fact, I don't know any country where there's only one particular group that would only suffer crimes. Even in the U.S., the All Black Lives Matter movement was a focus on a specific group suffering their own sufferings. But there was another movement saying, well, white lives matter too. So everyone wants to be heard. There are specifics and statistics in terms of certain crimes in the country and who commits these crimes and where they are more prevalent. Scientific analysis is there. Yet it doesn't seem that Trump would go into specifics on his or in his rhetoric. Where is he getting his intel or intelligence? And why would he allow himself to seem misinformed?
So I think that, again, the AfriForum folks have been lobbying Congress and the administration since Trump's first term. And they've made continuous trip to Washington to share their perspective, their position. And unfortunately, I don't think that the government of South Africa did a good job in the beginning at condemning some of these narratives and providing alternative facts, right? And I think that during Trump's second administration, that's when the South African government has been incredibly vocal about some of these accusations that are being made. And I always say this to foreign governments, that you have to manage the image of your nation. Sometimes, even though it is a very small minority people who are going to the U.S. Congress, who are going to the White House, who are going to the United Nations, who are going to the EU, who are going to different institutions to share a perspective that could be detrimental to your country and the image of your country, it is your responsibility to address it immediately. Because if you don't, that kind of narrative could end up becoming public policy that could have an impact on the image of your nation. But again, as I said earlier, I think that to focus on the issue around white South Afrikaners, their plight, as they've indicated to Mr. Trump, have been discriminated against in the United States, is really not a good use of the time of the government. So I do hope that there was discussions behind closed doors about, again, strengthening trade ties with the United States. The United States enjoys a great deal of trade surplus with South Africa. So the U.S. has significant business interests in South Africa, and so does South Africa in terms of having business interests here in the United States.
And then Trump didn't know when the G20 will be hosted in South Africa. Ramaphosa had to remind him that it's in November. Do you think this speaks to a disinterest in the U.S.'s Donald Trump attending?
I think it speaks to a number of things. I think the administration had said very early on that they will not be attending the G20. towards the end of the year because of policy disagreements between South Africa and the United States. And it's not just the issue of white South Africaners. It's South Africa's position as it relates to Iran, a nation that the United States has deemed to be a state-sponsored nation. Also, the issue around South Africa appointing a special envoy to the United States, who is a chair person on MTN, the telecommunications company that also have subsidiary in Iran. And also the issue around Starlink, and also obviously the issue with South Africa strengthening its ties with China. So there's a lot of policy positions that the United States just don't see eye to eye with South Africa on. And not to mention South Africa's ICJ claim as it relates to the state of Israel.
Yeah.
So the relationship between the two countries have been quite tense over the past several months since Trump has been in office, but it didn't start under Trump. It actually started under former President Joe Biden.
What do you predict will come out of the next few days of discussions?
Well, what I'm hoping to come out is I'm hoping that some kind of deal was discussed behind closed doors because, again, I think South Africa has a great deal of leverage and because South Africa did not go into this meeting as a weak nation. There's a lot of resources that South Africa has that the United States needs. And there's a lot that the United States has that the South Africa also needs and wants. So I think that it's a win-win for both nations. But what I can say is that it is important for it to be some level of compromise between the South African government and the United States. But obviously a compromise that does not undermine the sovereignty of South Africa, but also a compromise that also respects the sovereignty of South Africa.
Joanna, always great catching up with you. Thank you again and have a great Wednesday. It's Thursday. Yes, have a great Thursday.
Thank you so much, Dango. Have a good one.
Thanks. Joanna LeBlanc, a foreign relations expert who has served as senior advisor to Haiti's ambassador to the United States and Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Washington, D.C. It's 7 o'clock Central African time. Good morning. If you've just joined us, welcome to Africa Rise and Shine. My name is Asanda Beda as we enter the second hour of the show with you until 9 this morning. Thank you for tuning in to DSTV 802, OpenView 628 or www.channelafrica.co.za or via live streaming. Let's say good morning for our news bulletin. Here's Onel Nzinzi, and following her will be Musibudi Makura with our sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has told U.S. President Donald Trump during a media engagement at the White House that there is no white genocide in the country. The two leaders engaged with the media in the Oval Office were holding private talks in the White House. The South African delegation included well-known golfers, business people, labor unions and cabinet ministers. Ramaphosa said there was criminality in the country which targeted people of all races.
It will take President Trump listening to the voices of South Africans, some of whom are his good friends, like those who are here. When we have talks between us on around a quiet table, it will take President Trump to listen to them. I'm not going to be repeating what I've been saying. I would say if there was Afrikaner farmer genocide, I can bet you these three gentlemen would not be here, including my Minister of Agriculture. He would not be with me. So it'll take him, President Trump, listening to their stories, to their perspective.
South Sudan President Salva Kiir has reshuffled the senior leadership in the ruling party, according to an official decree. This says the country faces fresh fighting between rival armed factions and widespread speculation about Kiir's succession plan. Tabiso Luhugu reports.
South Sudan's President Salva Kiir has promoted sanctioned ally, second Vice President Benjamin Bolmel, as his SPLM party's deputy chairperson. A decree confirmed this on Tuesday. Bolmel was sanctioned by the United States in 2017 over suspicions his construction company received presidential treatment in the awarding of government contracts. If Kiir stepped down, Bolmel's new role as the SPLM party's deputy chairperson would make him acting president of the country. The reshuffle follows months of political uncertainty in which authorities placed Kiir's long-term rival, First Vice President Riek Machar, under house arrest, accusing him of trying to stir a rebellion. For Channel Africa News in Johannesburg, I'm Thabiso Lohoku.
Details remain sketchy around a group of migrants deported to South Sudan by U.S. President Donald Trump's administration. A flight carrying a dozen people had landed in Juba yesterday. A United States judge has now ruled that U.S. officials must retain custody and control of migrants sent to South Sudan. This is despite a court order restricting removals to other countries. Judge Brian Murphy issued the ruling after an emergency hearing in which attorneys of immigrants said the Trump administration appears to have begun deporting people from Myanmar and Vietnam to South Sudan. Channel Africa's correspondent Duka Wilson says this is not the first time the U.S. has made a similar move.
This is not really something that everybody expected, because this is the second time. Last month in April, a Congolese was deported to Juba, and the government said, no, U.S., this is not ours. They decided to return the deportees. So it created a very serious diplomatic issue, whereby at the end, the South Sudan government had to accept the Congolese deportees. Now this one has happened again. But unfortunately, until now, the government has not issued an official statement regarding the deportees.
A Kenyan and a Ugandan activist detained in Tanzania after traveling to observe a court appearance by a jailed opposition leader remain in custody. Tanzania's Law Society had initially said the duo had been deported. Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and Ugandan lawyer Agathe Atuhaire had gone to Dar es Salaam to attend opposition leader Tundu Lissu's first court appearance on Monday on charges of treason and publishing false information. The case has highlighted what government critics say is a growing crackdown on opponents of President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Lastly, Canada, Uruguay and Spain are amongst the countries calling for accountability from Israel after Israel's soldiers fired shots near an international diplomatic delegation visiting the occupied West Bank. No injuries were reported in the incident in the Flashpoint city of Jenin. The Israeli military accused the delegation of staying from a previously agreed route. Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney addressed the issue during a press conference.
The Israeli ambassador has been summoned to Global Affairs to see the minister and explain. We expect a full investigation. We expect a immediate explanation of what happened. It's totally unacceptable. It's some of many things that are totally unacceptable that's going on in the region.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, CAF to unveil a new CAF Champions League as well as new Confederation Cup trophy later on today in Johannesburg, South Africa, while Tottenham Hotspur defeat Manchester United to be crowned Europa League champions. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa emerged from his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump with a clear message that there was a firm agreement and undertaking that engagement would continue. The South African delegation struck a positive tone after their closed-door session at the White House, which followed at times dramatic televised scenes in the Oval Office, where Trump confronted Ramaphosa about the killings of white farmers, again describing it as a genocide. President Ramaphosa pushed back, explaining that there was a criminality in South Africa that affected all races. Sherwin Bryce Peace reports from Washington.
It's been described as an ambush. Within minutes of President Ramaphosa's arrival, his delegation and the media hurriedly ushered into the Oval Office for an episode of political theatre that has now become commonplace in this White House. Listen to President Donald Trump.
A lot of people are very concerned with regard to South Africa, and that's really the purpose of the meeting, and we'll see how that turns out. But we have many people that feel they're being persecuted, and they're coming to the United States. So we take from many locations if we feel there's persecution or genocide going on. And we had a lot of people. I must tell you, Mr. President, we have had a tremendous number of people, especially since they've seen this.
Despite the barrage of misplaced claims, including that when white people were murdered, their land was confiscated, even at one point likening it to a reversal of apartheid, Ramaphosa pushed back, firmly, but with a clear intention not to upset the entire apple cart.
There is criminality in our country. People who do get killed, unfortunately through criminal activity, are not only white people. Majority of them are black people.
Then, responding to an extraordinary moment when the lights were dimmed in the Oval and a TV screen wheeled in to play a video that in part showed EFF leader Julius Malema singing the Kill the Boer chant to a packed stadium, and footage of a road populated with white crosses as a reflection of white farm murders in South Africa.
Let me clarify that, because what you saw, the speeches that were being made, one, that is not government policy. We have a multi-party democracy in South Africa that allows people to express themselves, political parties to adhere to various policies, and in many cases, or in some cases, those policies do not go along with government policy. Our government policy is completely against what he was saying, even in the parliament. And they're a small minority party, which is allowed to exist in terms of our constitution.
There was also pushback from within the South African delegation, including Remgro chair Johan Rupert.
We have too many deaths, but it's across the board. It's not only white farmers, it's across the board. And we need technological help. We need Starlink at every little police station. We need drones.
Or COSATU President Zingiswa Losi.
The problem in South Africa, it is not necessarily about race, but it is about crime. And we think that we are here to say, how do we, both nations, work together to reset, to really talk about investment, but also help us in how we can have the technology and everything that is needed, President.
Later, at a separate briefing, Ramaphosa struck a positive tone on the road ahead, including greater participation of the USA in the G20 and a new trade and investment framework presented to the United States.
There will continue to be engagement between South Africa and the United States officials, particularly the trade and industry level, to deal with the package of issues that we had tabled that have to do with trade and investment. And if you like, Minister Dow will be able to outline some of those that are now being given serious consideration by the United States. So I was rather pleased that there's a firm agreement and undertaking that we are going to continue engaging. So there's no disengagement.
He conceded that the relationship had been contaminated by a number of issues, including the ICJ case against Israel, South Africa's positioning in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and the Afrikaner matter.
Our objective in coming here was to reset relations between the two countries and to reposition our relations, which had become contaminated by some of the issues. President Trump's concern is about the safety of people in South Africa, much as he zeroed it down to, say, white farmers. We kept saying there is a security problem, and we're not running away from that. There's criminality, and we even sought to deal with it from its genesis, that in the end, when the economy is not growing, when there's poverty, when there's unemployment, one of the social ills that we get as a derivative is criminality that spreads itself around the country. It's not only on farms.
Returning to the earlier Oval Exchange, we pressed the US President on the way forward.
If this Afrikaner resettlement issue is resolved, you're going to go into a room after this, you guys are going to talk. If it is resolved, what is the potential for the future-looking relationship between the United States and South Africa?
It's got to be resolved. It should be resolved. It's a little bit bad when you see a stadium with 100,000 people in it, because that means it's more than just a little movement. It's a pretty big movement in South Africa. So it has to be resolved. It'll be the end of the country.
But is there potential for the relationship moving forward?
I hope so.
You going to the G20 in November?
I mean, I'm not here for my health. I'm here to see what it is. No, I'd like to see. I have friends. I can tell you, Ernie Els and Retief Goosen, they feel so strongly they wanted to be here on behalf of South Africa, not on behalf of me.
Yes.
And, they said, can we be here for this? Because they love the country.
Despite the positioning of each side, the proof of this relationship's trajectory will be based on an expansion of the trade relationship, be that within or outside of the African Growth and Opportunity Act's framework, and perhaps less talk of genocide in the context of South Africa. I'm Shervin Bryce-Pease in Washington, D.C.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
Hey there, this is Palisa Tau, part of the dynamic duo that gives you on the move right here on Channel Africa from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Africa time. Well, it's with your help for the past 2 years that we have been a multi-award winning show.
Finally, yeah, we're keeping it on the move in 2025. And yes, I'm the other half of the duo, Benjamin Mushatama, and we're going to keep you going with the great conversations. Turn it up.
Okay. On the Move comes back in 2025 to give you more of the content that made us a Maldo and to deliver that bold, boundary-pushing content that you love. And of course, giving you a ride through the 3 hours of news, views, and entertainment.
Every weekday from 9 to midday Central African time, right here on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Cool.
Let's go.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
7:15 Central African time it is here on Africa Rise and Shine. Good morning if you've just joined us. Continuing with our coverage of our U.S. President or our SA President, Ramaphosa, visiting U.S. President Trump. So South African President Cyril Ramaphosa urged the United States President Donald Trump to continue partnering with South Africa as a trade partner. Ramaphosa was speaking in the Oval Office during what some analysts say was extraordinary meeting in the White House. Ramaphosa was invited to the U.S. following the controversial relocation in the U.S. of 49 white South African refugees who claimed their lives were in danger due to the color of their skin. Ramaphosa was accompanied by members of his cabinet, including Agriculture Minister John Steenhuisen, billionaire Johan Rupert, and former world champion golfers Ernie Els and Retief Goosen, who apparently facilitated this meeting. For more on this, we're joined on the line by Dr. Eliphas Ndoro from the Department of Economics at the University of South Africa. Dr. Ndoro, thank you for joining us. How are you on this Thursday?
I'm fine, thanks. And how are you?
I'm good, thank you very much. Firstly, what is your impression of this meeting between President Cyril Ramaphosa and U.S. President Donald Trump so far?
I think it's a very important meeting for resetting the South Africa-U.S. bilateral relationships because of the benefits that we get from the trade and investment. And that we have got the AGOA, and that needs to be renewed for the benefit of South Africa.
Let's talk in terms of the delegation that the President Ramaphosa has and senior leaders. So among that delegation were white members, including golfers Ernie Els and Retief Goosen, and South Africa's richest man, Johan Rupert, who we know are not part of South Africa's government, but were reportedly requested by President Trump to be part of the meeting, something that garnered criticism from some in South Africa. What do you make of their inclusion in this meeting?
If they were representing a business community, I think business communities are also involved in the presidential tours and where they're discussing discussions regarding investment.
Does the inclusion of especially Johan Rupert hold power on the side of business success in South Africa and its business reputation?
Yes, because remember, Rupert has got big businesses. He's also, he understands the political decisions that are made from other countries that have got impact in South Africa. So I think on his side is there to be a testimony that he's got still business interests in South Africa, and he believes that his interest in South Africa are not that much impacted, maybe, because I think he has to represent the business community as well as to give the world the confidence that he still believes South Africa.
Do you think President Trump will consider President Ramaphosa's plea for the U.S. to continue partnering with South Africa? Should we be looking at it even as a plea?
Yes, I think that relationship is very important. It's very important because South Africa, it also benefits from the agricultural technologies from the U.S. It also has got to import things to the U.S. And there are a lot of relationships that have been there in the past that benefit South Africa. Trade investment, the tourism, the transport, technology transfer, the defense, security, and the safety. So that relationship is very important and is needed.
You mentioned AGOA in terms of trade relationships between South Africa and the United States. So there is an importance there in terms of investment and employment creation for South Africa. But does the U.S. gain as much as South Africa does?
Yes, the U.S. also gains. Because remember, there are some precious minerals that the U.S. gets from South Africa. And the U.S. needs these minerals. And remember, South Africa also exports automotives, the car parts, the U.S., and there's ferroalloys, there's jewelry, there's also citrus that also goes to the U.S., the nuts. So U.S. also needs these things from South Africa.
Let's shift a little bit from business and talk about Trump raising the issue of farm murders and land expropriation by playing a collage of video clips from various addresses made by EFF leader Julius Malema, with him singing the Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer song. Was it an ambush, that video that was played, first of all? What do you think of that? And do you make, or what do you make of South Africa's response to that?
Although I'm not an international relations expert, but I think there have been some rulings that have been made by the court of South Africa, and I think that was supposed to be a point that was all supposed to be raised in the meeting there, that legally there were rulings regarding that. So whether it was an ambush or not, but I still believe legally issues were supposed to be raised during the meeting, yes.
And as much as we say it's a move away from business, it does connect, because if we talk farms and land expropriation, that does link to investment confidence in the country. But now, what do you make, Doctor, of the pleas that were made by South African billionaire business mogul Johan Rupert about Starlink, that company owned by Elon Musk, coming to South Africa, and how it will help combat crime?
Maybe by improving communication, because I think on my side, I believe in policing and enforcement is the critical thing. So how Starlink links, I'm not sure, but I think they've got a business motivation for that, which I'm not aware of.
What is Ramaphosa going to bring to Trump's table on business and trade? If we look at access to South Africa's mining output, I don't know if that has been said enough as it should. We have, the Draft Mineral and Petroleum Resources Development Bill under Minister Gwede Mantashe, which reduces inefficiencies and improves turnaround times for mining rights and permits. Can mining be another item that we bring as South Africa to the table?
Yeah, I think so. Because remember, US has got advanced technology which South Africa may need to use for exploration, and there might also be some discoveries of new minerals using those technologies. So I think it's very important to tap on the technology from the US.
Thank you so much, Doctor. We'll leave it there for now, and we appreciate your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Eliphas Ndoro from the Department of Economics at the University of South Africa. Our coverage on this continues in terms of that meeting between the SA and US states, and we'll be getting some word from the economic freedom fighters later on in the show, so stay tuned for that.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel Africa.
Ok.
Adivinha só, a Channel Africa quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel Africa está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
It's a hive of activity with various events taking place in Tanzania ahead of the annual Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture on Saturday. The lecture, to be held under the theme The State of the Continent, will take place at the Julius Nyerere International Convention Center. It is hosted by the University of South Africa, or UNISA, in partnership with the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, or TMF, the Government of Tanzania, and the Mwalimu Nyerere Foundation. This morning, invited guests will travel to Morogoro, a city located in the eastern part of Tanzania. To discuss this, we are joined on the line by Lukanyo Nia, who is Chief Operating Officer at the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. Lukanyo, thank you for joining us. How are you there in Tanzania this Thursday?
Thank you very much for having us. No, we're very good in Tanzania. It's a very warm and rainy Tanzania, though.
Please don't rub it in that it's warm while we're busy dealing here with the cold front in Johannesburg, South Africa.
I'm so sorry.
But good, all good and well. So Morogoro shares a historical connection with South Africa, we understand. Talk to us about that and the significance of this trip that will be made to Morogoro.
So as part of our Africa Day activity, that we believed it was important for the foundation and its delegations that are participating in the Africa Day lecture, that they also make a trip to Morogoro. Morogoro was really the home of the liberation movements, and in particular the ANC as well. The ANC had a military base and was based in Morogoro from the 60s. Your listeners will also know that in 1969, there was also the very momentous Morogoro conference that also took place in Morogoro. Lastly, you'll know after 1976 that there were many students that left South Africa. And when these students left South Africa and they went into exile, President OR Tambo believed it was very important and necessary for these high school students and these still school-going students to be educated as well. So he then, in partnership with the Tanzanians and funded by the Scandinavian countries, had the Solomon Mahlangu Freedom College established in Morogoro as well. And so Morogoro has all these rich links to South Africa to this day as well.
Tell us more about the planned tree planting ceremony in Morogoro. What does it symbolize?
So one of the things that are very important for I think as a South African, but as Africans in general, that we do not forget the contributions of the entire continent against the struggle for our freedom, and because there was this great struggle against the struggle for all humanity. And so what we then thought it was very important to do, that President Mbeki, who spent lots of time in Tanzania over the years, the first time he came here was in 1962, that it was really important that as we were here on this trip, that he goes and plants a tree in Morogoro, and he will join trees that have already been planted by two other, one former president and one current president. His tree will join President Kgalema Motlanthe. It will also join the tree of President Cyril Ramaphosa as well. And so that is really the symbolic reason why we're going there, in order to ensure that this umbilical cord that runs from South Africa right across the continent to Tanzania is not broken at all.
Well, a roundtable on leveraging South Africa's G20 presidency for Africa's advancement is taking place tomorrow. That's Friday. Why do you think that's important to host this roundtable?
The G20 presidency is a very important platform for the world. You will remember in India's presidency in 2023, the AU, the African Union, was accepted into the G20. And so what was previously used to happen is that South Africa was deemed the sole voice of the African continent. But equally, when South Africa adopted its G20 agenda for this year, they said that this agenda, its G20 agenda, would also be an African agenda. So a key reason for us having this roundtable tomorrow is for us to be able to have a long discussion amongst ourselves as Africans. Where are we? What must be done? And how can we utilize the G20 platform as a way of accelerating the attainment of our renaissance?
Absolutely. It's going to be a beautiful day on Saturday. We look forward to seeing what's going to transpire. But as you make your way through the day with all the other events, I hope you guys enjoy. And your warm weather. Aish. Thanks. Thank you, Lukanyo.
I'll try and come back home with some warm weather for
please,
you.
Yeah, please send them via live stream, please. We want the warm weather. Thanks so much, Lukanyo. Lukanyo is Chief Operating Officer at the Thabo Mbeki Foundation. That's going to be happening, the Thabo Mbeki Africa Day lecture on Saturday. So it's countdown to that. It's 7:30 Central African Time. Here's Onele Nzinzi again with our news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has summed up the bilateral meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump as a success. Ramaphosa was addressing the media following the closed-door meeting with Trump and heaped praises on his delegation. A Kenyan and a Ugandan activist detained in Tanzania after traveling to observe a court appearance by a jailed opposition leader remain in custody. Tanzania's Law Society had initially said the duo had been deported. A North Korean state media says a serious accident has occurred during the launch ceremony of a new naval destroyer. The North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is said to have personally witnessed the incident. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now it's time for our sports update. Here's Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Very good morning once again from the Sports Desk. So Tottenham Hotspur defeated Manchester United 1-0 to win the Europa League final on Wednesday in the city of Bilbao in Spain. The victory secured Spurs its first cup title in 17 years. Now, Athletic Bilbao's Estadio de San Mamés was full of tears of joy from Tottenham Hotspur fans clad in white and the players alike at full time as the whistle was blown, and seeing the team winning that competition and abolishing the reputation for not finishing big games. It's a major moment for Spurs as they win the club's first trophy since 2008 and its first continental silverware since the 1983-1984 season. So the North London club has struggled to shake off the reputation of being nearly good enough over the last decade, and also celebrated the win as if it was their first trophy in nearly 2 decades. Let's hear from the winning manager, Ange Postecoglou, also congratulating his players on a job well done.
Congratulations, Ange. I mean, you've told these players throughout they were going to do something special this season. How does it feel to see that realised?
Yeah, look, it's hard sort of to put into words the emotions. Super proud of the players. To quote my favourite Australian Prime Minister, Paul Keating, he said, after an unlikely victory, he said, this is one for the true believers. And this is certainly one for the true believers. And that means, an unbelievable group of players who never wavered, never lost faith in me and what we were doing.
Meanwhile, Manchester United boss Ruben Amorim said that he was confident he was still the right man for the job after the club's woeful Europa League loss to Tottenham Hotspur, but also would quit with no compensation if the club's board believed otherwise. Amorim, as well as his men, had hoped to salvage something from a disastrous season and has also seen them languishing 16th position on the Premier League standings with 1 game remaining this coming Sunday. Now, missing out of Champions League football is costly, with co-owner Jim Ratcliffe estimating the financial benefit of qualification between 107 to 134 million US dollars in broadcast, match day, as well as commercial income. The Confederation of African Football, CAF, in partnership with Total Energies, will unveil a new trophy and identity of the Total Energies CAF Champions League ahead of the highly anticipated 2-legged final of the competition. So the Total Energies CAF Champions League first leg will be played this coming Saturday, with the second leg then scheduled for Cairo, Egypt on the 1st of June. The new trophy will be unveiled today at the Total Energies offices in Johannesburg and on South Africa, and will be officially be unveiled at 12 p.m. Central African time, and will be attended by numerous African football legends, as well as the 2 participating clubs, Mamelodi Sundowns as well as Pyramids FC. The timing of the unveiling also adds to the excitement as well as grandeur surrounding the decider, following, or rather offering African football fans a glimpse of what will be at stake over the 2 legs in the capital city, Pretoria, and then in the capital city of Egypt, Cairo, over the next 2 weeks. This event also signifies a new bold as well as an exciting chapter for African club football, as CAF also continues to elevate the profile as well as the image of club CAF inter-club competitions. So today's event also builds on the recent partnership renewal between CAF as well as Total Energy, which saw the multi-energy company extending its partnership with CAF over the next 4 years. In tennis news now, Emma Raducanu suffered an injury scare just 4 days before the French Open begins at the Brit, lost to Daniel Collins in Strasbourg on Wednesday. The 22-year-old produced an excellent first set but needed treatment on a lower back issue after falling 5-love behind in the second. Seemingly also, she saw that it was not a problem of some sort, and she continued to play that match, but only only to lose at 4-6, 6-1 and 6-3 and reach the quarterfinals for Collins. Now, Raducanu had taken a wild card into the clay court event in Strasbourg to get more practice on the surface before the French Open starts this coming Sunday. Despite the off-court medical timeout that appeared to have no obvious signs of discomfort for Raducanu, but also put Collins under sustained pressure before the American managed to pull away. Collins, a former Australian Open runner-up who beat Roland Garros champion Iga Swiatek in Italy last week, will either play American top seed Jessica Pegula or Russian world number 30 Anna Kalaskaya in the quarterfinals of this competition. And finally, Masters champion Rory McIlroy says he's quite excited to play in his first tournament in India in the DP World India Championship later on this year. The 5-time major winner will be in the field for a new event which will be held at the Delhi Golf Club from the 16th to the 19th of October. He says this is a great opportunity and can't wait to play in front of the Indian golf fans. Now, confirmation of Rory McIlroy's first visit to India follows news that he will also return to the Australian Open for the first time in 11 years in December of this year. The world number 2, who also won the 2013 Australian Open title, will headline the field at Royal Melbourne from the 4th to the 7th of December, and also committed to playing in the 2026 tournament at Kingston Heath, following also disappointing tied 47 finish at last week's US PGA Championship. McIlroy returns to action at the Memorial Tournament in Ohio on the 29th of May. He's also set to compete at the US Open in Pennsylvania later on in June. That's a wrap from the sports desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or give us a call on +27 11714 4459. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Celebrate unity, progress, and pride with Channel Africa this Africa Month.
Nowhere be like Africa, nowhere be like home.
Listen in on SABC Plus, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, and Satellite Channel PAS 10. Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
On Rise and Shine, thanks to our team. Let's take a moment to say thanks to Tato Maporoma on technical production. On news is Onele Nzinzi. On sports is Musibudi Makura. Our social media being handled by Talent Butelezi. Production being handled by Hlengiwe Mabaso, Joey Lehodi, and Pumuzo Ramagadza. Economics news brought to you by Buntle Headbush. And that's our team as we say good morning for the next news bulletin in the world of business to Buntle.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Good morning. Our top business story this morning, South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says he had hoped to use yesterday's meeting with the US President Donald Trump to reset his country's relationship with the US and to discuss trade with his US counterpart after Trump cancelled much-needed aid to South Africa and imposed a 30% tariff as part of his currently suspended raft of import taxes. Trump referred to his administration's cuts to the U.S. Agency for International Development as devastating and urged other nations to also contribute. Ramaphosa told reporters that the two countries had agreed to discuss critical minerals in South Africa. His government had also submitted a trade and investment proposal that included buying liquefied natural gas from the U.S. A Congolese former prime minister has been convicted of embezzling millions from a huge failed agriculture venture. Matata Ponyo, who served as prime minister from 2012 to 2016 under then-President Joseph Kabila, was convicted on Tuesday in a case involving the embezzlement of $245 million. He was sentenced to 10 years forced labor. In the same case, former governor of Congo's central bank, Deogracius Mutombo, was also sentenced to 5 years of forced labor, as was Christo Grobler, a South African businessman. None of the three is in custody, and all were tried in absentia. Moving on to Ghana, Ghana's central bank says it's ready to rethink its interest rate approach as inflation remains stubbornly above the set target, despite showing some signs of cooling. The central bank says it wants to check if its monetary policy is working after surprising the market with a rate hike in March. Consumer price inflation in Ghana dropped to 21.2% year-on-year in April from 22.4% in March, but was still significantly above the 8% target, pointing to the tricky balance the Bank of Ghana faces. Our morning financial indicators: $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,591 naira 59 rather. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 32. Kenya, the dollar is at 128 shilling 28. In Zambia, it's at 27 kwacha 8. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 riyals 66. Russia, 80 rubles 11. India, 85 rupees 58. China, it's 7 yuan 20. And South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rand 91 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at the commodities this morning, gold is trading stronger at $3,338 and platinum at $1,077 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $64.78 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Buntle Headbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Buntle. The International Court of Justice, or the ICJ rather, this week ruled 3 islands located off the coast of Gabon legally belong to Equatorial Guinea. The ruling settles a decades-long dispute between the West African neighbors, Bani, Konga, and Kokoteros Islands, which are located in potentially oil and gas-rich waters, have been controlled by Gabon since its troops forcibly evicted Equatorial Guinean soldiers from Bani in 1972. For more, we joined on the line by Lucas Olo, member of the Commission of Jurists in Equatorial Guinea, to discuss this. Lucas, good morning to you, and thank you for making time for us on this Thursday.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. How has this ruling been received in the country, in Equatorial Guinea?
I think the ruling has been received as a victory because it's a long-standing dispute among these two countries. But on the other side, you have to keep in mind that the ICJ literally says that the treaty that is in force and that should be used to make the delimitation is one that was enforced before the independence of both countries. That just means that right now they have to base the borders on that older treaty rather than a treaty that Gabon was arguing was in force and signed in the 70s. So it's seen as a victory, even if we have to rely on the colonizers' borders.
As you say, it's been ongoing since the 1970s, this dispute. Why do you think it took so long and for us to get to this point?
Yeah, I think it should be considered that these borders or these islands are really not that big. They're so tiny that no one paid too much attention to it at the beginning. So it was not a very contentious issue back in the days. It was just a matter of an island or two that were there. But the fact that it is potentially rich in oil and gas it has become more and more important for both countries. And as you know, both Gabon and Equatorial Guinea are countries that have been producing oil for a long time, but both countries have also declined in the exportation of oil, and at the same time, they also are being considered two of the most corrupt countries in Central Africa. So this oil might be a way to keep the systems ongoing, or in my view, I mean, my hope should be a signal to improve governance structures so that this oil can be utilized in a manner that benefits the population of both countries.
Is the ruling final and binding, this ICJ ruling?
Yes, the ruling is final and binding in the sense that there is no way to challenge it any longer. But as I mentioned before, this ruling is just indicating the treaty that should be used to delimit the borders. That now both countries have to come to a negotiation where they will delimit exactly where the borders fall. And it would be important for both countries to, as African countries and countries that are really separated by arbitrary borders. To be honest, these are not borders that are natural borders. This was the lines that were drawn by the colonizers. Hence, it would be a good idea for both countries to come to an agreement, both on the delimitation of the borders, but also on how to exploit these resources that might be underneath. We don't know yet what are the resources, though, but it should be a way to call both parties to use these funds, as I said, to the benefit of both populations. Keep in mind that Equatorial Guinea has also other rulings from the ICJ that they are not abiding to, particularly one that talks about the assets seized in France against the current vice president of the country. So we are doubtful that this will be the end of the whole dispute.
Well, let's hope there will be a positive way forward, as Gabon, as much as they're expected to remove their soldiers from Bani, their spokesperson has said that negotiations may also form part of the way forward, and it seems like Equatorial Guinea may be open to that. So we hope for a positive outcome for both countries, as you state.
Yes, I think it would be the best scenario for both countries. Although we are, because as I said, we have concerns about the governance of both Equatorial Guinea and Gabon. We know that this might take much longer. The lack of respect of international rulings in other cases, be it even from South Africa, are also a concern. Therefore, we really hope it's a point where at least Equatorial Guinea decides to move to respect international rulings as this one is favoring the country. It's also be a way to understand that the international law should be applied in Equatorial Guinea and in Africa in general.
Thank you so much again, Lucas, for your time.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Lucas Olo is a member of the Commission of Jurists in Equatorial Guinea.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
África. Conhece o Ntivani?
Claro que sou eu.
Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma.
Eu amo música africana.
Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel Africa. Adivinha só, a Channel África quer ajudar o Tivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel África está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
As we said, we'll continue with our coverage in terms of the meeting between U.S. President Donald Trump and South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa. Now we speak to the Economic Freedom Fighters, the South African political party that became center of these discussions yesterday at the briefing by the U.S. President and South Africa's President. Nqobile Mhlongo is EFF Head of International Relations, member of the party's Central Command team and member of Parliament. Nqobile, thank you for making time. How are you this Thursday?
Good morning, Asanda, to you, your viewers, and your live stream listeners. We are doing well as the EFF. In fact, it's a good Thursday to be a member and a voter of the Economic Freedom Fighters. The land issue debate took center stage yesterday at the meeting between the USA and the SA president. Instead of them discussing their diplomatic ties, the leader of the EFF and our revolutionary principle stance became the center of that meeting yesterday. So it's a good day to be a member and a voter of the EFF. We should walk with our chest out and be very proud of ourselves.
During that meeting, Trump played a video featuring the voice of your leader, EFF leader Julius Malema, singing "Shoot the Boer, Shoot the Farmer," followed by a field of crosses with the U.S. president saying it was a burial site of white farmers. The Equality Court in South Africa, and we don't know if Trump did his research on that one, had ruled the song could be sung as it did not constitute hate speech. Do you think Trump was interested at all in listening to what President Ramaphosa had to say regarding this?
The U.S. President, Mr. Trump, was not interested in listening to facts. In fact, he can't say that he's misinformed about what is happening in South Africa. He's got everything at his disposal to access information. He knows for a fact that Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer song was reaffirmed in the Constitutional Court, which is the highest court in South Africa. It was reaffirmed in the Equality Court. It went to Supreme Court of Appeal. Then it went to the Constitutional Court. It was affirmed that it can be sung as a heritage song because it reminds us of our struggle. So Trump knows that he is not going to agree to a narrative that seeks to erase the narrative he wants to run with. So Trump was not interested in listening to facts. He's never interested in listening to facts. He's interested in running with the propaganda that is given to him by AfriForum and Solidarity Movement to spread lies that there is a genocide in South Africa. Why is he doing that? He is doing that so he can bulldoze South Africa and push us into a corner whereby we then move to agree with any terms and conditions he puts forward and comes to look like a savior when it comes to rescue South Africa from an economic disadvantage that he would have put us at. So he's not interested in facts. He will never be interested in facts. He's pushing an agenda. Why is he pushing an agenda? For he can see that the world is uniting and consolidating economic power outside of the US. The US is used to dominating economy, is used into dominating the military space. But now that they see that we are forming BRICS outside of the US, there's economic activities that are happening, countries are arranging themselves outside of the US, then they feel that no, America is using their grip over some countries. Therefore, they must now move to pull those countries into agreeing to their terms and conditions. That's what it is. It's nothing more. Facts will not work because when he's presented with facts, if he accepts the facts, therefore his narrative that he wants to push about South Africa will not be able to proceed.
What do you make of the way that South Africa responded to that in terms of that Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer song? And as the EFF, what voice would you have added?
It was quite embarrassing that Cyril Ramaphosa could not defend the courts that he presides over as a president of South Africa. You will know that judges at the Supreme Court of Appeal, at the Constitutional Court, are appointed by the president. He did not defend the judges of this country. He could not defend our courts, which means he literally did not defend our justice system, because this is a verdict that was given by the highest court in South Africa. He ought to have defended. He was supposed to explain that this song is sang because the court of South Africa and our constitution allows it. He should have explained that South Africa's democracy is based on the constitution. Therefore, the constitution is supreme, and once the Constitutional Court has given a verdict on the matter is deemed to be final, and it is correct. This is our struggle song. He missed an opportunity to explain that the white people of South Africa who are obsessed that they are being killed, they do so for their own fears, because they know they killed our people to dispossess us of our land and our mineral resources and our livestock. Now they fear that since we did not, perhaps in their minds they thought that we want to revenge, but instead of revenge, we are calling for land to be equitably redistributed to all. So that delegation failed. I don't know why Mr. Ramaphosa took that delegation. Steenhuisen really failed South Africa. He went there to reaffirm Trump that indeed there's farm mothers in South Africa. Even Griff went there to do the same thing, and Annie did the same thing. So really that delegation failed Ramaphosa and failed the people of South Africa, because they went to reaffirm the stance of Trump that indeed there's farm murders in South Africa, which is not true. In South Africa, there's a problem of crime, but the biggest problem of crime is gender-based violence and femicide. There's murders, women and children get killed, and the adult on a daily basis. That's the real crime that is happening in South Africa, not farm murders. We know that farm murders, most of the time, it's not true. It's really not true. Most of the people who actually get killed in those farms is black farm workers, not the farm owners.
As the economic freedom fighters, let's talk economics a bit. What do you make of the pleas that were made by South African billionaire business mogul Johan Rupert, who was part of the delegation accompanying President Ramaphosa, about Starlink, that company owned by Elon Musk, coming to South Africa and how it will help combat crime? Does South Africa need Starlink?
No, definitely. We do not need Starlink in South Africa. And that plea that was made by Rupert, that was the real reason they went there. They went to negotiate for billionaire Elon Musk to bring his Starlink company. This halapalu that there's a white genocide in South Africa is done because Elon Musk is frustrated. He wants to bring his Starlink company into South Africa and bypass BEE laws, Black Economic Empowerment laws, that are laws of the Republic. So we must remind Ramaphosa in his delegation that he does not hold unilateral executive authority to scrap laws that are made by the Republic. He must come to Parliament if he wants to reverse any laws that the Republic has passed. And we can tell him for free, he's not going to pass in Parliament. We are not going to allow it. There will not be BEE laws that get to be scrapped in order to accommodate Elon Musk. It's not going to happen, that thing. So we heard the agenda from the real president of the state. It was clear yesterday that Johan Rupert is the president of South Africa. He says, we are here to beg you, please come and help us. The man was begging, he was on his knees. I've never seen Johan Rupert begging, but because he was with his master, the man who supports them, who made them what they are, he went to beg for Starlink. They said they are there to reset diplomatic ties, diplomatic relations, but then it turned out that they were there to beg for Starlink to come to South Africa. We are going to be watching it with keen interest. We can guarantee Elon Musk, he must not even bother to apply, because right. We are going to oppose it. His company is not going to come and operate in South Africa if they are going to disregard our BEE laws.
Thank you, Ngobile. We appreciate your time and for joining us here on Channel Africa.
Thank you very much for having us.
Ngobile Mhlongo is EFF, Economic Freedom Fighters, Head of International Relations, member of the party's Central Command team, and member of Parliament. Well, I think we'll leave it there for this Thursday in terms of coverage on Donald Trump and President Cyril Ramaphosa's meeting. Lots to come up in this next hour as we enter it. It's the final hour of Africa Rise and Shine, and we'll get into our programming in just a bit. If you've just joined us, well, thank you for doing just that. Good morning. morning to you. I'm Asanda Beda. We're coming to you from our Johannesburg studios in South Africa. Good morning to Onele Nzinzi. Now let's start with our news bulletin and then sports headlines by Musibudi Makura.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has summed up a bilateral meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump as a success. Ramaphosa was addressing the media following the closed-door meeting with Trump and heaped praises to his delegation, which consisted of 4 ministers as well as business people, golfers and trade union representatives. Ramaphosa says a variety of issues were hashed out during lunch with Trump and there was an agreement to continue engaging, especially on issues of trade. He also confirmed U.S. participation in the upcoming G20 summit, to be honest, for South Africa in November.
My takeaway from that is that G20 participation by the United States is going to be happening. So we're particularly pleased with that. So all in all, I do believe that our visit here has been a great success. We've been able to achieve what we set out to achieve re-engagement with the U.S., to put the issues of investment and trade on the table, and to ensure that we continue engaging.
International relations and diplomacy expert Oscar van Heerden has meanwhile commended South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa for not allowing the conversation with U.S. President Donald Trump to degenerate into an argument. Ramaphosa met Trump at the White House and the two took questions from the media. Ramaphosa is visiting the U.S. with the delegation in a bid to reset relations. President Ramaphosa appealed to Trump to listen to the accounts from his delegation regarding the situation in South Africa and the erroneous claims of genocide taking place against white farmers in the country. Dr. van Heerden says Trump's strategy was anticipated.
It was expected that Trump was not going to let the white genocide matter go, and we saw the dramatics around that. I think it's a good thing that Ramaphosa did not stoop to the level of degenerating to wanting to debate and argue. And besides, he was just not afforded enough time to give a reasonable explanation. And I think that Trump's strategy was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. He simply had to bring a matter to a conclusion on the white genocide issue and why he brought the refugees to America.
A Kenyan and Ugandan activist detained in Tanzania after traveling to observe a court appearance by a jailed opposition leader remain in custody. Tanzania's Law Society had initially said the duo had been deported. Kenyan activist Boniface Mwangi and Ugandan lawyer Agathe Atuhaire had gone to Dar es Salaam to attend opposition leader Tundu Lissu's first court appearance on Monday on charges of treason and publishing false information. The case has highlighted what government critics say is a growing crackdown on opponents of President Samia Suluhu Hassan. Access to the social media platform X has been restricted in Tanzania after some official accounts of government and private institutions were targeted by hackers. The official police account was on Tuesday compromised with sexually explicit material and false information that the president had died being posted. The police disassociated itself from the information and said an investigation was underway to identify those responsible. Users in Dar es Salaam could still not access a site yesterday unless they use virtual private network, which is illegal without a permit. Authorities have not commented on whether they are blocking access to X. Lastly, North Korean state media says a serious accident has occurred during the launch ceremony of a new naval destroyer. The North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is said to have personally witnessed the incident. The BBC's David Bamford reports.
진수 과정에 미숙한 지휘와
A stern North Korean state television newsreader tells the nation that operational carelessness was behind the accident that led to panels of the warship's hull being crushed as it headed down the slipway. An angry and presumably embarrassed North Korean leader, Kim Jong-un, called it a criminal act that could not be tolerated. The accident took place at a shipyard in the eastern port city of Chongjin. Last month, North Korea launched its first 5,000-ton destroyer, the Chohyun, by far the largest in its naval fleet.
Channel Africa News, I am Onele Ntsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, CAF will unveil a new CAF Champions League as well as a CAF Confederation Cup trophies later on today in Johannesburg, while Tottenham Hotspur defeat Manchester United in the Europa League final. Details coming up at the bottom of the hour.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
All right, this morning we speak to Helen Ziller, a profile of a former journalist and anti-apartheid activist. She is a South African politician and humanitarian activist. She's one of the journalists who exposed the cover-up around the death of South African Black consciousness leader Steve Biko. Helen Ziller is the Federal Council chairperson of the Democratic Alliance, the political party which is member of the Government of National Unity, or GNU, in South Africa. We welcome her now on Channel Africa's Rise and Shine. Good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us this Thursday, Helen. How are you?
Good morning, Asanda. It's very good to be with you. I'm very well, and I hope you are too.
We are just a bit cold in Johannesburg. We've got a cold front, but we'll survive. If you even see what I'm wearing today,
sure you will.
It
yes,
shows.
I can see you look gorgeous.
Thank you. Well, today we are, or you are rather, on the other side of the interview. I get to be the interviewer, and you are the interviewee, because we've worn the same hats for some point. Because you started your podcast called Tea with Helen in 2019. Let's start there. You as a show host, what inspired that idea, first of all?
Well, I'd never seen a podcast in my life at that point, and somebody that I know said you'd be a great podcast host. So then I went on that, and I tried to do that, so it was nice.
What was most important to you in terms of the guests that you wanted to have on the podcast?
Well, I was still a very tough journalist, and I was still in a mood of exposing people, which was probably a bit rough. But look, I didn't have a full idea. I just wanted to take the toughest people that I could and give them a run for their money.
Right. And as a communicator, I mean, you are a journalist, or you were a journalist in your earlier years. Did this reignite your passion for people's stories?
Well, I've always had a passion for people's stories, and whether I was a journalist or whether I was a politician, it didn't change. I'm totally passionate about getting South Africa to work. And why do I want South Africa to work? Because I want everyone to have a future here. I want your children and my grandchildren, and one day your grandchildren to have a wonderful shared future here where everybody has a chance to make it in life.
What were your lessons this time around in terms of hearing from people's stories?
Well, look, it was for a very, very short time, that Tea with Helen podcast. So, I mean, there were far more lessons from my many years at the Rand Daily Mail as a journalist. And there I covered the very worst things of apartheid. As you rightly said, I was the one who exposed that Steve Biko died of brain damage and not a hunger strike, as Jimmy Kruger tried to pretend. And I covered ghastly things like the Celia Commission of Inquiry into the Soweto uprisings. I covered forced removals. I covered uprisings on university campuses. I went everywhere in my little beetle, and I covered a lot of things and saw much more then than I did in the very brief time of my podcast.
Yeah, and being a journalist at that time, let's go back there. As you were an anti-apartheid activist as well as journalist, you exposed the cover-up around the death of Black consciousness leader Steve Biko while working for the Rand Daily Mail. This was back in the late 1970s. As a journalist at that time, things were very much different from what it is now. There was no social media, not as much as one needs to be considered relevant, like how many followers you have or how much of a media personality you are. A story was a story, and journalists just had to focus on that, and most importantly, remain objective in delivering knowledge to the people. What about journalism at that time do you wish we still had now?
Well, there was absolutely no social media, and no journalists tried to build a brand for themselves. The most important lesson we learned in our journalism course that the Rand Daily Mail ran before you could become a journalist was to know that your opinions were irrelevant to the story. The whole idea was, and this is what we were taught again and again, if you go to a place where a tragedy is happening or has happened, or if you go to a meeting where people are discussing things, there are thousands and thousands of people who are interested in knowing what's going on, but can't get there themselves. So you are the medium that has to reflect as accurately as possible to the greater public what's going on. And your opinion is irrelevant. What people want is the facts so that they can make up their own mind. And that is what we were taught again and again. Today, journalists really don't write for the public anymore, as far as I can see. They write for each other. They're trying to impress each other. They're not saying, how do I serve the public? How do I make sure that the public is getting all the facts they need? How do I be sure that I'm not serving my own ego, but that I'm out there doing the public's work, as it were? And now this whole nonsense about building journalists' brands and getting personal followers and stuff really puts the journalist in far too much of the limelight. They are just the conduit. And that is what we learned so hard in journalism school, and that was applied. Later on, if you'd been a very good journalist doing that for many years, you might get a column in which you were allowed to express your opinion, but not otherwise.
Yeah. Yeah, I wish those times would come back as well. I really do. I think of social media. I mean, right now we're live streaming. I feel like I'm on radio and television at the same time, something that wouldn't even happen even when I started back in 2009. But it's interesting times, and I guess we have to adjust to that.
Yes.
Let's talk about what was
So we're
happening.
live streaming. Oh, am I actually on television now?
You are on YouTube right now and Instagram.
drinking my coffee, blowing my nose. Right.
And sometimes you even forget. You just go into your natural state. But
I just sometimes thought the sound is better on the Zoom link, so that's why I was here. But here I am, YouTubing as well. Hi,
yes.
everyone.
Yes, absolutely. Let's go back then to that moment. That's not so... I guess it's difficult to think about and remember, but what was happening at the time and your feelings and maybe even internal emotional conflicts as you are now exposing the real reason behind the death of Steve Biko. And yeah, talk to us there, your mindset.
Well, at the time I'd been covering a lot of very difficult things. I just finished a year of covering the Celia Commission of Inquiry into the Soweto uprisings that, as you know, obviously spread around the whole country. And I heard some very harrowing and terrible things there. And then Steve Biko, who was the Black consciousness leader at the time, and who was leading the whole host of Black consciousness movements that had arisen at the time, was a very prominent leader. And he was taken into detention, and within a week he died. That was in September 1977. And after he died, Jimmy Kruger, who was the then Minister of Justice, so-called, got up and announced that he died after going on a hunger strike. And he made out as if Steve Biko had died of hunger. Now, I knew immediately that that couldn't be so. My editor knew immediately that couldn't be so. Steve Biko was a big man. In fact, if truth be told, he was slightly overweight. So there's no way that a big man with lots of reserves to draw on is going to die after a week of being on a hunger strike. It doesn't work like that. People can eat very little for a very long time and nothing even for a very long time without dying. So we knew this was a cover-up. So my editor went and asked me to try and uncover what happened. And my first assignment was to speak to all of the doctors that had seen Steve Biko since he was detained. There was one doctor called Dr. Ivor Lang. He was a district surgeon in Port Elizabeth at the time. Then there was the senior doctor, the senior district surgeon in Port Elizabeth called Benjamin Tucker. Then there was a neurologist called Dr. Colin Hirsch. And then there was the family pathologist, Dr. Gluckman, Dr. Jonathan Gluckman in Johannesburg. And I went to speak to all of them. Dr. Gluckman, with the permission of Mrs. Biko, allowed us to see the pathology report. And there it was quite clear that Steve Biko had died of brain damage and not from a hunger strike at all. And the autopsy, in which they draw fluid from the spine, showed red blood cells in the spinal fluid. And apparently, according to what the doctor told me, you only get red blood cells and blood in the spinal column fluid if you've had a brain injury. And that's how we were able to draw that conclusion.
Your emotional conflicts, did you have any internally in terms of what do I do now with this?
Well, what do I do now with this? We found a way to publish it. The whole point was to uncover a cover-up. We were trying to expose a cover-up that we knew was going on. And obviously, it's incredibly shocking when you find out all of the unbelievable human rights abuses that are going on around you. It's totally shocking. It's distressing. But the only small comfort you can get in the process is knowing that you're exposing it. As I did with forced removals, uprisings, revolts, everything, everywhere. And that's what my job was. But I just told the facts. The facts were harsh enough. The facts spoke for themselves. You didn't have to put any drama on them. The facts spoke for themselves.
Right. 18 minutes past 8 Central African time. It is here on Africa Rise and Shine. If you've just joined us, we are in conversation with South African politician and humanitarian activist, was one of the journalists who exposed the cover-up around the death of South African Black consciousness leader Steve Biko, Helen Zille, who is the Federal Council chairperson of the Democratic Alliance currently. Let's stay with South Africa's emancipation for freedom. You, together with your husband, Professor Marie, had offered your home as a safe house for political activists during the 1986 state of emergency in South Africa. Paint for us a picture of how difficult it was. And I don't know if it was maybe difficult for you, but I imagine how difficult it would be to maintain a marriage or a family life during those times. You also had a 2-year-old son at the time. One can just imagine that life was not just about keeping your home or making sure dinner is served at a certain time, etc. People were being tortured, killed, and arrested. You speak of these human rights atrocities that were happening. There was turmoil.
Well, at the time, I was a member of the Black Sash. And I went to a Black Sash meeting, and somebody arrived there, Jenny Schreiner, arrived there and got up and said they were looking for safe houses, because the police were just detaining everybody. So I went home and I said to my husband, can we please offer our house as a safe house? And he immediately said, yes, absolutely we can. And we were very well placed for accessibility, and we had a kind of a little cottage outside in the garden, which was ideal. And throughout that period, throughout both states of emergency, we had people hiding in our house. Yeah.
Was it difficult to maintain a family and be a mom?
Well, I was working very hard at the time, and you just do things. You just get on with it. You just do what has to be done. I don't know how to put it this way. You make sure your child is fed, taken to creche, looked after, gets enough sleep, all that stuff. You just do it.
Yeah. And how much do you appreciate the ease now of motherhood? At 74 years old, you've got 2 adult sons. I've got 2 teenagers that I'm struggling with. Does it get easier?
It gets much easier. I mean, for me, the most difficult part was the first 18 months. My eldest son especially didn't like to sleep at all. And it was a nightmare with him. He just didn't want to sleep at all. And eventually, we found a way of getting him down. My second son was a lot easier. I've also got 2 sons. And, you make it work. My sons are wonderful people today. And my husband was a wonderful husband. I've been very blessed in that respect. He always took his parenting duties very seriously. We always shared parenting duties. We both took it very seriously. And we're a happy, loving family today. My eldest son has 2 beautiful children, my grandchildren. He's also got a wonderful wife. He chose very well. So we're in a good space, family-wise.
That's beautiful. You've played so many roles within the Western Cape government of South Africa that I think a lot of people don't know that you were actually born in Johannesburg, in Hillbrow, as an eldest child to parents who left Germany to avoid Nazi persecution. So you've got some Jewish lineage. How much of an influence did that experience have on your decision to fight for the cause of the oppressed?
A lot. I mean, my parents knew what oppression was. It wasn't just a theory for them. Most of my father's family was killed, actually, in the Holocaust. Most of them. I mean, he had very, very few family left. He spent the rest of his life trying to trace what had happened to his family, and most of them had died in the concentration camps. So, I knew from very first-hand experience. My mother's family were also refugees in the main. And, that my parents hated discrimination of any kind. My mother joined the Black Sash very early on. My father was in the Torch Commando back in the day. And that's how I grew up, fighting for justice.
Yeah. As chairperson of the Federal Council of the Democratic Alliance, that's been since 2019, and as also you're a former DA leader from 2007 to 2015, and the DA, for those who don't know, if you didn't hear me even earlier, it's South Africa's main opposition party and now part of the GNU. When you look at the state of political opposition on the continent, if we look at cases like Tanzania, for example, Tundu Lissu, the opposition leader, being charged with treason. Uganda's own Bobby Wine, we spoke to here at Channel Africa the other day. Chad's Sukse Mazra, who's on allegations of inciting hatred in the country because of his opposition to the leadership. Do you think we could have a full democracy where all voices of oppositions are allowed to be heard?
Well, I think we really must. I mean, that is the system that works best. You should be allowed to oppose the ruling party. You should be allowed to say some very tough things. Obviously, I don't agree with kill the Boer, kill the farmer. I believe that's incitement to violence very badly, and that should be forbidden. But to criticize the ruling party and to mobilize against the ruling party is absolutely a normal part of democracy. And we really stand for that very strongly. I believe in free speech, but that stops at incitement to violence and imminent harm. But otherwise, I completely believe in free speech, and I don't like trumped up charges against opposition leaders. At least in South Africa, we have an opposition party that has grown, and the ANC accepts so far when they don't win an election. In this last national election, the ANC got 39-point-something% of the vote. They fell under 40% of the vote, and they accepted that they fell under 40% of the vote. And they had to put together a coalition government. That's what happens in democracies. And until the whole of Africa can do that, we're not going to have a democracy in Africa.
Do you think we have a strong and credible opposition parties on the continent, looking at the younger ages of some of our African opposition leaders as well? Are we moving to a positive direction when it comes to I guess, relatability and in turn influence of opposition
I think
leaders?
Zambia is very, I think Zambia is quite advanced. In Zambia, you have changes of government through the ballot box, and that's what I'm interested in. Do you get changes of government through the ballot box? And that is what's very, very important. It was very distressing to me when Mugabe lost the election in Zimbabwe, and then somehow they managed to put together some kind of wobbly coalition that destroyed the Movement for Democratic Change, the MDC. That was very unfortunate. If you lose an election, you get out of power. Simple as that. Same thing in Kenya. If you lose an election, you don't start putting up coalitions. If the other party got more than 50%, you get out of power and you make place for the other party. It is simple. It's not hard. And until Africa can do that, we won't have democracies in Africa.
Let's go back to that meeting between U.S. Donald Trump, as you speak of Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer song that came up in the discussions between him and our President Cyril Ramaphosa. There was also talks about a genocide against white Afrikaners in South Africa. What were your initial thoughts when you heard firstly the news reports, and what view do you hold now in terms of what you would have said as a response to U.S. Donald Trump?
Well, what I would have said to Donald Trump is that we have far too many murders in South Africa. It's quite shocking how the murder rate in South Africa. If I was the Minister of Agriculture like John Steenhuisen, I would have stood up for the farmers, and I would have said farmers, white and black, are the target of farm murders, are the target of stock theft, are the target of all sorts of crimes. And I would have stood up very strongly for all the farmers and the farm workers. Now, to have a song like Kill the Boer, Kill the Farmer is just not acceptable. And I do think that Trump asked a very good question. How can you sing a song like that and incite a stadium full of people to go out and kill other citizens of South Africa and those that are producing your food and not be arrested? It's a good question. And I'd like to hear the answer to that question. The problem is that in South Africa, incitement to violence, especially if it's against whites, gets accepted quite calmly. I hope no white person would ever dare to say, kill black people, or sing kill black people off a stage somewhere. So that kind of thing is completely unacceptable, and we must never, ever regard it as normal. But I would have said there isn't a white genocide in South Africa. But I would say the farmers are being targeted. Farmers are being targeted by certain political parties. And it's crazy to do that because we have the highest food security in South Africa of any African country. Why do you want to target the people who are responsible for your food security?
Right. Well, on a lighter note, this month of May 2025, you were part of a comedy roast where comedians poke fun at you, your career, and then each other. Why would you agree to do something like this, I wonder?
It's fun, it's a new thing. It's a different thing. I like a bit of fun now and again. I like a bit of sparring. I don't mind an argument, I like that sort of thing.
Have you always been able to laugh at yourself?
Well, I hope so. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself. Otherwise, you lead a very miserable life.
Right. And of course, at some point now, you have to respond and throw jabs, your own jabs, at whoever made fun of you or on stage. How prepared were you for that?
That's the part I like the best.
Really?
I like throwing jabs. No, I went up there and I was quite prepared for it, yes.
Right. I love it. And that's the note we're going to end it on. But thank you so much. And it's always so wonderful to have a profile or have somebody join us as a guest on the show who has so many facets to them and wears so many hats. And of course, we look up to you not just as South Africa, but as the continent in terms of what you've achieved in your life, especially as a woman talking to another woman.
Great. That's been wonderful to speak to Nombuyiselo, hey? Thank you very much.
Asanda.
Are you Asanda? But why does it say on the bottom of your screen on Mbuyiselo?
I'm not sure why it says that. I'm not
But
sure.
that's what it says on Mbuyiselo, because I said at the beginning, hello, Asanda.
Yes.
And then I thought, see, that's a mistake, because on the bottom of the screen it says Nombuyiselo.
Well, it's okay. But thank you so much for your
It's
time.
a pleasure. Okay, then.
I
Bye.
appreciate it. Helen Zille is a South African politician and humanitarian activist, currently Federal Council Chairperson of the Democratic Alliance. That's the political party which is member of the Government of National Unity, the official opposition party in the country, South Africa. Well, we'll leave that chat there because we need to go to headlines now. It's 8:30 Central African time. Good morning, Onele.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa has summed up the bilateral meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump as a success. Ramaphosa was addressing the media following the closed-door meeting with Trump and heaped praises to his delegation. Uganda's parliament has passed an amended law that permits military tribunals to try civilians, prompting protests from the opposition, who said the move violated a Supreme Court ruling in January that banned such trials. And the United Nations says it's been able to dispatch 90 trucks carrying vitally needed food aid into Gaza Strip from a holding position just across the southern border of the enclave. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Good morning, Musibudi Makura. She's got our sports news.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Indeed, I do, Asanda. Very good morning once again from the Sports Day. So South Africa's representatives in the Basketball Africa League this year, made by basketball team, have recorded their first victory in this year's competition, beating Kenya's Nairobi City Thunder 74-71. MBB had lost their opening two matches this past weekend against Al Ali Tripoli as well as Rwanda's APR, but bounced back yesterday in their third game in the Nile Conference. They had been behind in the first three quarters, but veteran campaigner Peter Prinsloo explains just how they managed to fight back in that game.
Oh, ecstatic. I mean, it was a hard-fought game. We got up early and then we dug ourselves in a hole. I think we were down 17 or 20 points to one. And we knew that, we needed this win today. We have a goal of getting back to South Africa for the playoffs, and we knew that started today. We lost our first two games. We saw the mistakes we made, and we realized what we needed to fix today. So we dug in, guys, understood the mission, and we clawed back and used every bit of energy until the last second, and we got a victory. I mean, this is what we wanted, so we got a day to recoup and then back to get another one.
Prinsloo also produced a BAL career high for himself in this game, scoring 30 points with 11 rebounds, as he shares just how they tactily shared points in this game.
I mean, obviously with the way the game was going, if I could have took the shot, if it came to me, I would have wanted that. But they also understood that I am hot, so they took me away. And we have faith in him. He's one of our best shooters. So when he got the ball, we know that's going in. It's an open jump shot for a knockdown shooter. And I mean, he took it home. I got us there and he took us home, and that's all we wanted today, a victory. Go home, now we can recoup and focus on the next one.
On to this now, Manchester United boss Ruben Amorim says that he's confident he will still be able to continue in his job, and he believes he is the right man for the job after the club's woeful Europa League loss to Tottenham Hotspur, but would quit with no compensation if the club's board believed otherwise. Amorim and his men had hoped to salvage something from a disastrous season that had them languishing 16th on the Premier League table with just one game remaining. Missing out of the Champions League is costly, with our co-owner Jim Ratcliffe also estimating the financial benefit of qualification between 107 to 134 million US dollars in broadcast, match day, as well as commercial football. Now, the Confederation of African Football, in partnership with the Total Energy sponsors, will officially unveil a new trophy as well as identify for the Total Energy's CAF Champions League ahead of the highly anticipated two-legged final of the competition. So the first leg of the Total Energies final, will be played this coming Saturday in Pretoria, South Africa's capital city, with the second leg set for Sunday, the 1st of June in Cairo, Egypt. The new trophy will be unveiled today in Johannesburg at the Total Energies head offices in Johannesburg, and in presence there will be the two teams competing in this final. That's of course Mamelodi Sundowns as well as Pyramids FC. The timing of the unveiling also adds to the excitement surrounding the decider, offering African football fans a glimpse of what will be at stake over the two legs in Tshwane as well as Cairo over the next 2 weeks. This event also signifies a new bold as well as exciting chapter for African club football as CAF continues to elevate and profile the image of CAF inter-club competitions. Today's events also builds up to the recent partnership renewal between CAF as well as Total Energies, which saw the multi-energy company extending its partnership with CAF for the next 4 years. And finally, in golf news, Masters champion Rory McIlroy says he's quite excited to be playing in his first tournament in India in the DP World India Championship later on this year. The five-time major winner will be in the field for the new event, which will be held at the Daily Golf Club from the 16th until the 19th of October. He says this is a great opportunity and can't wait to play in front of Indian golf fans. Confirmation of McIlroy's first visit to India follows news he will also return to the Australian Open for the first time in 11 years since December of this year. The world number 2, who also won the 2013 Australian Open, will also headline the field at Royal Melbourne from the 4th until the 7th of December, and is also committed to playing in the 2026 tournament in Kingston Heath. Following a disappointing tied 47 finish at last week's US PGA Championship, McIlroy also returns to action at the Memorial Tournament in Ohio on the 29th of May. The 36-year-old will also compete at the Canadian Open in the first week of June before bidding for his second major win of the year at the US Open in Pennsylvania in the USA later on this year. And that's a wrap of your sports news this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. More sporting updates coming up with the On The Move team in the next hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, simply send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11714 4459. It's 8:37 a.m. Central African Time for Channel Africa Sport. I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. Celebrate unity, progress, and pride with Channel Africa this Africa Month. Listen in on SABC Plus, DSTV Audio Bouquet 802, and Satellite Channel PAS 10.
Let's find out what's happening in the world of business. Here's Buntle Headbush with the details.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thanks, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa says he had hoped to use yesterday's meeting with US President Donald Trump to reset his country's relationship with the US and to discuss trade with his US counterpart after Trump cancelled much-needed aid to South Africa and imposed a 30% tariff as part of his currently suspended raft of import taxes. Trump referred to his administration's cuts to the U.S. Agency for International Development as devastating and urged other nations to also contribute. Ramaphosa told reporters that the two countries had agreed to discuss critical minerals in South Africa. His government had also submitted a trade and investment proposal that included buying liquefied natural gas from the U.S. The leader of South Africa's Economic Freedom Fighters Party, Julius Malema, says Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana has reneged on extending the zero VAT rated list. Godongwana delivered this year's budget speech to the National Assembly in Cape Town. The budget was delayed as the African National Congress and GNU partner, the Democratic Alliance, were at loggerheads over the proposed VAT hike. The EFF also opposed the hike. Malema says Godongwana delivered an austerity budget.
The ANC is stuck. There is no believable program to grow the economy and to create jobs, and that's why they wanted to go for a shortcut, which to them was automatically VAT. This is an austerity budget because even where they said we were going to put so much, but we're no longer putting so much. If you check in the main, it's education, it's health, it's police, it's services that are directed to our people. They said they were going to increase the list of the zero rated. Now they came back and said they are no longer increasing the list of the zero rated.
South Africa's National Treasury and provincial treasuries have identified over $17.4 billion in wasteful spending on non-performing programs since 2013. Government spending is estimated to reach nearly $145.17 billion in the 2025-26 financial year, with social services accounting for more than half of spending. Government says a cut in spending on non-performing programs will override the need for higher taxes going forward. Deputy Finance Minister David Masondo.
And National Treasury, we've been undertaking spending reviews from 2000. The key issue is how those spending reviews are treated by accounting officers and departments. There's so much we can do from our side, but departments are responsible for cutting fat and waste in the way in which they spend public funds. And the President, working with National Treasury, will also be working hard to make sure that we cut waste.
Regional environment ministers have convened in Harare, Zimbabwe, to discuss the success and challenges of the SADC Transfrontier Conservation Area over the past 25 years. The agenda includes topics such as climate change, the wildlife-based economy strategy, anti-poaching efforts, and vulture conservation. Furthermore, against a backdrop of decreasing global conservation funding, the summit is expected to present a unified stance, emphasizing the potential negative impact of the ivory trade ban on countries like Zimbabwe. Head of Communication and Public Relation for the SADC Secretariat, Barbara Lopi, explains.
So what we were having today was a joint meeting of SADC ministers responsible for environment, natural resources and tourism. And the ministers were reviewing the progress on implementation of different sectors within the Ministries of Environment and Tourism, looking at forestry, natural resources, environment, and also the SADC Transfrontier Conservation Areas celebration was also part of the discussion.
Ghana's central bank says it's ready to rethink its interest rate approach as inflation remains stubbornly above the set target, despite showing some signs of cooling. The central bank says it wants to check if its monetary policy is working after surprising the market with a rate hike in March. Consumer price inflation in Ghana dropped to 21.2% year-on-year in April from 22.4% in March, but was still significantly above the 8% target, pointing to the tricky balance of the Bank of Ghana that it faces. Taking a look at our financial indicators this morning, $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,591 naira 59. In Botswana, it's at 13 pula 32. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 28, and Zambia, it's at 27 kwacha 8. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 66, Russia 80 rubles 11, India 85 rupees 58, in China it's 7 yuan 20, and South Africa $1 is trading at 17 rand 91 cents. $1 is trading at 74 pence to the British pound and 88 to the euro. Looking at our commodities this morning, gold is trading at $3,338 and platinum at $1,077 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $64.78 a barrel. And those are your business news at this hour. For any business stories you would like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +27 11 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business, I'm Wintle Hedbush.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. A fresh morning, a fresh perspective. Stay tuned to Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
45 minutes past 8 Central African time. Let's take a look at IMX Frankfurt now, the world's leading business events trade show. Its 2025 edition concludes today after 3 days of global networking and industry innovation. Held from 20 to 22nd May, the event hosted thousands of professionals in the meetings, incentives, conferences and exhibitions MICE, otherwise known as sector. South African tourism, through the South African National Convention Bureau, SANCB, showcased the country as a top destination for business events. To speak to us about their participation at the event, we're joined on the line by Thandiwe Matibela, Global Manager for PR, Communications and Stakeholder Relations at South African Tourism. Thandiwe, welcome back to Rise and Shine. How are you on this Thursday?
Good morning, and I like the welcome back. It feels like home. Thank you.
Yes, listen here, we are claiming you as ours now.
Thank you. Good morning to you and the listeners. Yeah.
So what were South Africa's key objectives for participating in IMEX Frankfurt 2025, and do you believe they were achieved?
Yeah, you see, IMEX Frankfurt is one of the few strategic events that we've identified through our research that actually is quite, useful and yields a great deal of results for us as South African tourism. And in fact, for the greater tourism sector, because there you find the right quality of people to interact with as you try to position South Africa, as the destination to come and host your events, meetings, and conferences. So what we do as South African tourism, we partner with various businesses in South Africa that offer this kind of tourism products. In fact, we call them business events products because they are really around events, meetings, and conferences, as I've already outlined. And we come together at a South African pavilion and we invite and we show up as a united front and we invite buyers. And buyers are those people that actually package, tourism offerings for people to then come to South Africa. We target associations, so those associations that come to host big events. We target, people that actually organize conferences because then they scout out for different locations for their various clients.
What kind of feedback did you receive from global buyers and some event organizers about South Africa as a business events destination?
Look, through our various research and interactions and engagements with different buyers, we know that South Africa is a very attractive country, for business events. And we know that our pie keeps growing. Already in our recent ICA rankings, which is actually the International Congress and Convention Association rankings, South Africa was ranked 37th globally. It may not sound like it's high, but it's very significant. We're actually ranked the highest on the African continent because we've hosted 98 international association meetings. So these meetings, not that we haven't hosted other meetings, but these meetings have to meet a certain criteria for them to actually be counted by the ICA. So, and we know that Cape Town led with 58 of these meetings. So really and truly, people are bringing their events of different sizes and magnitudes to our country. And the fact that we've got not only these, quality assured business events and facilities, we've also got a rich history and culture, and people actually do want to come here and mix the two. So out of the corridors of conference exhibitions into immersive experiences of our culture. And people actually come to South Africa to find their joy as well, because as you know, we've got a campaign that says South Africa awaits, come find your joy. And that's exactly what people come to do in South Africa.
Were there any particular cities or provinces in South Africa that you were promoting more strongly at IMEX? And if so, what makes them attractive for international conferences?
What we do as South African Tourism is we invite all of our provinces to participate with us. In fact, the more provinces we have, the better, because it then showcases the length and breadth of of the variety of the South African tourism offering. So that's what we do. So we have got representation of various provinces across our different business events that we have. Earlier this year, we were at ITB, which is more of a leisure business trade show, and there we had representation from Gauteng, Western Cape, as well as the smaller provinces like the Eastern Cape and the Northern Cape. So we do not favor one product over the other. We just one province over the other, but rather we take provinces and products that actually have got the offering that the target audience we are communicating to is looking for. And so if it's a province that has got, big events, facilities, then absolutely they sign up to go with us to IMEX Frankfurt. But the point also that is important to make here is that as South African Tourism, we are making sure that we promote the smaller provinces as well, because geographic spread is really important, and geographic spread refers to being able to expose as much of our country to as many visitors as possible, and that means the smaller provinces too.
How does South Africa plan to build on the leads and connections made then at IMEX Frankfurt to grow its business events sector?
That is the actual core of the function of the South African National Convention Bureau, which is the business unit of South African Tourism. So we've got a dedicated team that goes to these trade shows, that actually meets up with the various, potential buyers or potential conference organizers. And then we come back and we engage with them, and we engage with them meaningfully. So at IMEX Frankfurt, we've got a series of meetings. We showcase, we do what we call as a presentation. So we actually showcase the various offerings that South Africa has got. We've got networking opportunities, and that's the business of the South African National Convention Bureau. We come back, we make sure that we prepare whatever else it is that those conferences are looking for, and this we call, our bids, and we make sure that we engage with people. So that is what we do, and we've grown as the South African National Convention Bureau. We've been able to secure meetings all the way up to 2030.
And how has this gathering reiterated the importance for you of international trade shows like IMEX in helping South Africa to reach its broader tourism and economic development goals?
We've always known that trade shows for South Africa are important, because that is the one moment in time where the people of influence are gathered, and that's the one moment in time where people are actually also looking for specific products, or they are actually open to being enticed to coming to various destinations. So strategic business events have always been important to us, but what is more important for us is the research that we do in ensuring that that particular event remains relevant for us, also as we shift in terms of focus on source markets. So we know that IMEX Frankfurt remains that kind of an event, and as far as our objectives and our strategy can tell, we will continue to participate at IMEX Frankfurt.
Thandiwe, thank you so much, and safe return back. If you're not yet, I don't think you're back, hey? You're still on your way.
Ma'am, I am firmly back in my country.
All right. I was going to say safe travels, but thank you so much, and we appreciate your time again here on Channel Africa.
Thank you so much, and I really feel welcomed at Channel Africa, and thank you for your team on every support that you've given us.
Awesome, and we send the love back. Thandiwe Matibela is Global Manager for PR, Communications and Stakeholder Relations at South African Tourism.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Regional environment ministers have convened in Harare, Zimbabwe, to discuss the successes and challenges of the SADC Transfrontier Conservation Area, also known as the SADC TFCA, over the past 25 years. Their agenda includes topics such as climate change, the wildlife-based economy strategy, anti-poaching efforts, and vulture conservation. Furthermore, against a backdrop of decreasing global conservation funding, the summit is expected to present a unified stance, emphasizing the potential negative impact of the ivory trade ban on countries like Zimbabwe. John Kasim reports.
Following a successful SADC TFCA conference that began on Monday, environment ministers from the region have begun their discussions in Harare to advance conservation efforts. Over the past 25 years since the SADC TFCA's establishment, conservation in shared areas has been strengthened through various policies aimed at giving the region a unified voice. This resulted in several trans-frontier conservation area agreements, with Zimbabwe leading the way by establishing 6 such agreements with other neighboring nations. Although poaching incidents surged in 2011 and the immediate aftermath, the SADC TFCA, through its law enforcement and anti-poaching LEAP strategy, successfully reduced these occurrences. While this shared strategy proved effective for some wildlife species, South Africa has experienced an increase in black rhino poaching. This led to widespread dehorning, which has contributed to improved rhino conservation regionally. The ministers are also expected to review the wildlife trade and trafficking, a growing issue driven by demand for big cat and vulture body parts in Asia. Ultimately, they will revisit the ivory trade ban imposed on countries like Zimbabwe by CITES, with the goal of voicing their opposition at COP20 later this year. Channel Africa spoke with Barbara Lopi, Head of Communication and Public Relations for the SADC Secretariat, who provided further insights.
So what we're having today was a joint meeting of SADC ministers responsible for environment, natural resources, and tourism. And the ministers were reviewing the progress on implementation of different sectors within the Ministries of Environment and Tourism, looking at forestry, natural resources, environment, and also the SADC Transfrontier Conservation Areas celebration was also part of the discussion. As you know, we just concluded the 2-day meeting for the 25 years of SADC TFCA's celebration. So part of their meeting was also to receive the report that came from the 2-day conference that we had. And then tomorrow, they're going to have now the Council of Ministers meeting. This is one of the committees that prepare documents that are taken to summit. So we have summit on Friday. So today's meeting was clearing documents that will now be submitted to the Council of Ministers, who will also consider those documents for summit.
In the interim, the ministers are expected to produce a report for the Heads of State Summit scheduled for Friday. Simultaneously, the SADC TFCA is celebrating its conservation success in the region with a banquet hosted by President Emmerson Mnangagwa on Friday. John Kasim in Harare, Zimbabwe for Channel Africa News.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Right, as we say goodbye on Africa Rise and Shine, we say good morning to On the Move. That's coming up next on Channel Africa, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But to also make sure that you stay tuned is Benjamin joining us to tell us what you can expect. Good morning.
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. I'm great. How have you been holding it down? Seems like you've been doing a good job on your own. And solo.
You think so? Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that positive point.
Well, today we're going to have our parenting and family corner feature. Mm-hmm. And we're going to be looking at something very interesting, parenting with the in-laws. Because at times, your parenting style is very specific. It's probably very different to a generation before yours or the way, our parents have parented, right?
Yeah.
And then comes the in-laws, and then they want a child maybe disciplined in a particular way, or maybe to be spoken up to, or certain things. We were raised like our parents used to raise their voices at us and say, hey, stop doing that. Then maybe you're like, you know what, no, I don't want to approach it this way. I've got a different way to manage conflict in my parenting style.
Yeah.
And then you have to now navigate your style versus the in-laws. How have you dealt with that?
Do you think it matters or what gender the child is? Because I feel in my experience, it mattered whether it had to do with my son or my daughter, because I've got two.
Okay. And who did you throw to the in-laws? Your son?
I didn't throw anybody. But there was much more interest in raising or getting involved in how my son is raised than it was with my daughter. But then again, he's the firstborn, so maybe that also has some, I don't know.
So you've never had an issue where you're like, in this issue, this way, I'd rather prefer my style of doing
You do prefer your own style, but now you have to be respectful to your elders. So it's a bit of a challenge. And the older you get, it becomes easier to navigate. But when you're a first-time parent, I can imagine that it's stressful.
Yeah, that's what we're going to be chatting about today.
Okay, nice, interesting. So it's goodbye from me, Asanda, Beda, and the Africa Rise and Shine team. And over to Onele Nzinzi with the news.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Looking at your top stories.